Good evening, everyone. I'll call this Committee of the Whole meeting to order at 6 o'clock here in Council Chambers. Do not believe we have any remote electronic attendance, so we move to board appointments. These are reappointments of Kevin Belk, John Miller, Diana Halbenstricker, and Mike Wennekamp to the Special Service Area Number 5 Board for a full 2-year term to expire January 1, 2025. And I believe we do have public comment this evening. Do you have the order, Chief? And just a reminder, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Diane Moore. Joel DeVries, here.
He's in the other room.
Did you see how many people? I had to work across the street. Watching basketball.
All in half.
That should probably be good if we bifurcated them.
Hello, I'm Paula Nab. I live in Moline. Lived here my whole life, and I sell real estate for Mel Foster, so I have a lot of pride and vested interest in Moline in regards to the ADU concept. So when I did speak at the committee for the building. And so anyway, I'm just going to give you a couple of highlights as far as my perspective and the view of the ADU and why it's just, I'm not too excited about it because of a smaller property in the back of another property. I think the main key factor for me is that it's just basically going to hurt resale for all parties. The property that has the ADU in the backyard, and then all of the neighbors that are nearby being able to have their, their view blocked by an ADU in the backyard. So that's one of them. And then, for resale just down the road, it could affect financing in some fashion, depending on the lender as far as if it's gonna, because it's gonna be viewed as a income property. So you've got a residential, owner occupied, and then another person, a renter basically in the ADU. So that could be a dilemma as well. So I'm just trying to keep the integrity of Moline because I love Moline, I love the terrain, I love all of the ravine lots, and I think that's the pride of ownership that, we have in Moline that I'd like to keep. So, the other cities do it, let them do it. I think it's not really plausible because I think it's gonna be very expensive to build with the restrictions that you guys are gonna be requiring. And I don't think it's quite fair if a subdivision has covenants, then they can have in their covenants that they are protected and they don't have to have ADUs in the back. So the covenants protect those, that whole subdivision. So what it would come down to, if it was, the scenario in my neighborhood, I'd just go around, and talk to the neighbors and say, let's come up with, some covenants and bylaws so we're protected, so we don't have to deal with the ADUs in our neighborhood. And which it's gonna be a cost. It's probably a cost of having those drafted with an attorney. So probably about $1,500 to $2,000 to have that done. So anyway, that's kind of the highlights or the lowlights of my opinion. So anyway, thanks. Thank you very much. Who's next?
Jody Fisk.
So good evening. My name is Jody Fisk, and I'm also a resident of the city of Moline. I'm here this evening, like Paula, to express my opinion in opposition to the ADU ordinance. I've been before this group before, so I know that you're aware of some of my concerns. They remain the same. And if you have had an opportunity to learn about what happened at the Plan Commission's public hearing, a large number of individuals from the community came out in opposition to the ADU ordinance because of their concerns about the impact that this will have on our single-family neighborhoods. So as the, as the concept continues to be presented as sort of carriage housing for elderly family members, I think it's just important to remind people that under the present ordinance, ADUs will be available to be rented out to others which will just really exacerbate the city's lack of rental housing oversight. So I've spoken to dozens of members of the community about the ordinance. I have not encountered people who support it. Again, I think there was a large contingent of people who spoke out against the ordinance at the Plan Commission's public hearing. I just urge you to consider the fact that, you know, as a community, as every community has, Moline has issues that need to be solved through creative thinking and through everyone's collective efforts. And so I just urge you to focus your attention on resolving or solving some of the problems that we already have and not enacting an ordinance that's just going to bring new and additional problems to the city. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Vicki Graves?
Good evening. My name is Vicki Graves. I'm a resident of Moline at 1421 34th Avenue, Beeport, and I am the chair of the Moline Plan Commission. Tonight, I want to highlight for the public that it's December 7 meeting, the Plan Commission, which is responsible for zoning oversight, voted 9-1 against the proposed ordinance amendment that would allow rental ADUs in Moline. Earlier today, I sent an email to city council members outlining my own reasons for voting against the proposed ordinance amendment. After reading widely and listening to all of the arguments, I believe that encouraging creation of more rental properties in single-family neighborhoods in Moline will create enforcement problems for residents and for city staff. I believe that changing the number of unrelated people who can live in a single-family dwelling from 3 to 5 would create neighborhood and safety problems. I believe that the proposed amendment will put us at a disadvantage relative to other communities in the Quad City area, and I am convinced that allowing ADUs to be created and rented out in single-family neighborhoods in Moline will lower property values for neighboring properties and lead to a decline in residents' ability to use and enjoy their homes. I have listened to the arguments that ADUs will help older residents age in place, as promoted by AARP. I was on the board of Alternatives for the Older Adult for nearly a decade. I absolutely support the idea that ADUs limited to family members and caregivers can be a good solution to allow older residents to stay in their homes. However, I reject the idea that older residents or people of any age should be able to create additional rental units for profit in neighborhoods designed for single family to the detriment of the surrounding properties. Renee Moline has suggested that we need ADUs to attract younger residents who need affordable housing. I absolutely agree that Moline needs to find ways to attract and retain young people. I have a 21-year-old student who attends college in Boston. As a parent who has gotten to know lots of people that age, I know that the idea of moving into a converted garage or shed in Heritage, Homewood, or Green Acres is not what those young adults are looking for. They want to live around other young people in neighborhoods where you don't need a car to go shopping, to get to recreation, to go to restaurants, to go to bars. Moline absolutely needs to develop such areas, and I believe Alderman Timian has even been giving thought to neighborhood hubs that would meet those needs. ADUs are a distraction from better housing solutions to attract young adults. And then once those young adults start a family, they want a home in a nice neighborhood. I have lived in Moline for all of my life, except for college and 4 years on a work assignment. I have lived in 6 neighborhoods in Moline with varying housing price points. Some with small yards, some with big, some with alleys, some without. The house I grew up in was next door to a duplex and across an alley from a halfway house for recovering alcoholics. It was a great neighborhood. But in 2020, my husband and I bought a house in Moline. I'm sorry, I wasn't watching the clock. Okay, so
Thank
in
you for
short,
your letter, and thank you for speaking tonight.
yeah, and just one additional comment. I would suggest that rather than try to amend the proposed ordinance, start from scratch after we get the rental inspection program in place.
Thank you. Anyone else? That's all. Okay, thank you so much.
Or do you want to go down there?
Ditto everything they said.
All right, for the record, that was Diane Moore.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Questions on the agenda, just a few points of clarity. We've removed item 13.4, Council Bill 1009, 2023 to the non-consent agenda, and item 13.5, Council Bill 1010-2023 has been pulled by staff. And item 6.1 in our COW agenda has been pulled by staff. That staff member was not able to be with us this evening, so that will continue to come back. So then, any further questions? Seeing none, we'll move to 6.2, an ordinance approving a community host agreement by and between the City of Moline and Lakeshore Recycling Systems LLC. Mr. Vitas.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, it gives me great pleasure to present you tonight with a project that we have been working on for nearly 18 months at the staff level, and including Mr. Walter Willis, who is Executive Director, I believe, if that's the right title, with Swalco, which is another solid waste management agency in Lake County, Illinois, similar to the one we have here in Rock Island County. And he has been our consultant on the project at this point. Also this evening, I believe Ms. Neary is here to represent LRS, and we'll have some brief comments as well. But this culminates many, many months of discussions, starting with discussions with the Airport Authority, in particular the Executive Director, who brought this project to my attention initially back in the summer of '21. So it's been a long road to get where we're at. The deal's not done. Nothing is ever done until the fat lady sings, as the old proverbial saying goes. And this evening, what we want to do is we want to allow Walt to give you an overview of the host agreement, which is a critical piece. It's not something that necessarily has to be offered, but in the case of LRS, it has been offered up, in addition to the citing ordinance, which appears later on the agenda. All of this, I will tell you, is governed by state law, and it is a very complicated process, hence the need for the consultants, and of course, Ansel Glink is well placed. Our attorney, who you know, David Silverman, has done this before successfully, so he has also been engaged in this very directly all throughout the process. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight. He's attending a public hearing in another community. So with that, I want to turn this over to Walter Willis to do his brief overview of the project and the process.
All right, good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Walter Willis, and as Bob said, I'm the Executive Director of an agency just like yours out in Lake County, Illinois, and I've done about 30 different host agreements and sightings throughout the state through my 35 years, so got a little bit of experience with this process. So what I've done, my role is really to assist you with negotiating the host agreement and also creating that siting ordinance. These are two pretty much best management practices. Municipalities like yourself, around Lake Park not too long ago in my county, went through a similar process. The idea behind having your own local siting ordinance is you can the state law is there under section 39.2, but it doesn't have a lot of detail about what kind of content needs to be in the application. Are you going to hire a hearing officer or not? What's the role of that person? What's the public participation process? So there was a lot of things that we needed to bolster to have your own local siting ordinance, just to make it clear the rules of the game during this process. And in fact, the Illinois Pollution Control Board and the courts that typically get these cases, and if they're ever appealed, have recognized that these local ordinances are helpful in the process. So it's kind of standard process. And the host agreement itself is basically a private contract. There's no requirement that a landfill or a transfer station do a host agreement under Illinois law, but it is recognized under that part of the siting law that if a host agreement is negotiated, it needs to be brought out to the public and part of the siting application. So we're being very transparent. We had a meeting earlier today with the Rock Island County Waste Management Agency, which Mr. Waldron is the chair of, just to bring them up to speed on the project. Obviously, Moline is a member of that agency, so you're basically letting your members and your peers know what's going on. So I was going to focus on the host agreement right now to give you kind of the highlights of that agreement. Just so we're clear on what this is, a garbage transfer station is an enclosed facility where the packer trucks would pick up the material from your curb. They go to a building, an enclosed building, they dump their load, and then it's put into a big semi. You probably put about 3 packer trucks into one semi, and that just makes the movement of the material much more cost effective. If you think about the waste industry, it's really a logistics industry. 70% of the cost of everything we do with recycling or waste disposal is in that truck and that driver. So making that more efficient is very important to the waste industry. And this will allow LRS to be a true competitor in this marketplace. They're already here. So that's obviously very important, I think, to the city as well, to keep competition in our marketplace. The agreement is not that long, but I'll give you the highlights. There are 27 sections. The agreement would last with the life of the facility. So as long as that transfer station is accepting waste, they will be paying fees and abiding by the requirements of the agreement. LRS must maintain records on how much waste they take in, how they categorize it, and how they paid the city on it. So we have the ability to go back and audit, if you will, that we've been paid correctly. That's kind of a trusted verification, right? The host fee itself, we were able to get $2.54 a ton. That is on par with other transfer stations that are in the Chicagoland market. Typically in rural Illinois, you don't see host fees on transfer stations. I'm not aware of them. I don't think Kewanee has one on theirs or Muscatine. So this is a good number. I feel good about the $2.54. It's definitely on par with transfer station host fees in the state of Illinois. So wanted you guys to know that. One of the things we talked about, and Mr. Waldron was there on behalf of the agency, and even the solid waste plan says if a facility is brought into this county that's not a landfill, where the fee, a lot of the money for the agency comes from the landfills, it's a state authorized fee. There is no such thing for transfer stations, only landfills. So the plan that you guys have in Rock Island County basically says the agency needs to be involved in any financial arrangements. So we're trying to follow the letter of the law and the intent of the agency. So Mike was involved in those discussions. What we're recommending to you as a council is the overall fee would be $2.54, and that you would split that with the solid waste agency because they collect $1.27 at the landfill, in effect making them whole if any of this waste were to leave the county, which it may. LRS has a landfill in Henry County. So that was important to the agency, and I think to Moline as a member of the agency. So if you do the math on that, the facility is proposed to take 520 tons a day, of which 400 would be municipal waste and 82 would be hydro excavation soils or waste, which is basically wet dirt or mud from utility-related projects where they're using excavators instead of using hydro excavation techniques to suck the material out instead of digging in with hose and disrupting all the other utilities. So it's a growing thing that the utilities are very interested in this, and LRS would be offering a site where that material could be taken. So that's 480 tons a day times $1.27 times 280 days, and you get about $170,000 a year would go to each entity, to the city and also to the agency. It's important to note that there is a CPI on that, or Consumer Price Index. So every year that fee would go up to a maximum of 3%, or the actual CPI for this region of the state. We zeroed in on this region of the state. So that fee will go up over time as well. Another really important aspect of the negotiations, especially for the agency, was recycling drop-off. There used to be 6 of them in this county, and about a year and a half ago, I guess, the funding became more difficult, the sites, et cetera, so those sites are no longer out there. Well, Lakeshore is saying that they will use their site out by the airport. It's 10 acres, plenty of space, to have a public drop-off for anybody in the county to use during operating hours. So any type of curbside recyclables, all the different materials would be accepted at Lakeshore's facility at no cost. They are also willing to support a second site in the county with the city's input and others. I'm sure they would start talking to the agency about where do we want to have a second drop-off in the county. So LRS is willing to work with the city and indirectly the agency on that matter. So it would bring 2 of the 6 drop-offs back, and access to recycling, as you know, is very important. If we're going to talk about recycling, we have to give people access to it. This helps your business community, your multifamilies, and others that don't have curbside recycling. Another important thing that we negotiated was that the site would also accept electronics. Right now, people have to go to Scott County to get rid of their TVs and their computers and those types of items covered by the state law. LRS is saying they will have a site on their location that would be available to the residents of Moline only at this time for all electronic devices covered under the law. We did allow them to charge a reasonable fee for the big CRT TVs, which we're pretty much flushing out of the system. We might still have a couple in our basement somewhere. And the big console TVs. But anything else, the big widescreen TVs or any other electronic device under the law would be accepted at no charge right here for the residents of City Moline. So I think that's a real, an upgrade to the current program, which is still fairly good. But this does bring another drop off for your residents. Now, it's just not all about the drop off and the host fee. This agreement allows you to have a little bit of a hammer of your own. Obviously, you rely on the state to enforce the regulations. This facility, if it got local siting approval from you, would have to get a state permit. But a lot of us know waiting on the state to take action under permits can take some time, right? So we've got provisions in this agreement that deal specifically with litter control, that they will do daily collections of the litter, that all operations will be inside, trucks will be tarped, all these things are in the agreement. Storage of waste, there can't be any waste on the floor overnight. You can't use the building to store garbage. You can put it in the truck and tarp it and put it outside for up to 24 hours. But the floor has to be clean every night. We also have provisions in there about rodent and vector control. This is important because it's near the airport. So there are extra requirements for this building to be enclosed. And we're watching very carefully that the engineering team for LRS is addressing all those things. Also, the traffic, typically with these sites, these transfer stations, the two biggest issues are the impact on property values and traffic. So there is a side agreement between LRS and the airport, and they also have to do a traffic study as part of the application that you will all see. So those are all things that we've done to make sure that you have a little bit of say in some of these control measures, so you don't necessarily have to wait for the state. If things are going on at the site, we can pull the agreement out, our attorney, and say, hey, you're not abiding by this part of the agreement. So it does give you some local control. To that, if there are any disputes, we'll have a 30-day cure. Cooler heads will prevail, hopefully, or we go to court here locally in Rock Island County. And finally, we do have a provision in there, it's very important. LRS is offering you this host agreement, that is a lot of money, but in no way does that prejudge the application that they're gonna file with you. The host agreement needs to be set to the side, and then you guys will ultimately act as a jury during that process to determine whether or not the applicant has met their burden under the law. And a lot of that will be coming from council, but the overall timeline for this project is currently, we have hired a technical engineering consultant to help us review the application. It's draft right now. If things move forward with you guys approving or taking action on this host agreement and the siting ordinance, we would expect that they would file the application in mid-February. You have to wait 90 days to hold the hearing. That's in the state law. The intent there is to give anybody that's concerned about this plenty of time to do their homework. And so that gets us to mid-May, June, when you would actually be sitting down and holding the public hearings, and that process would start then. So, real quick, do you want me to go over the siting ordinance now, or do I wait till later in the agenda?
Have to wait till
You
the
have to
next
wait.
item.
Yeah, you have to wait.
So, I know I went over a lot there. So, I know that LRS does have a video.
It's not on the couch, it's only the first reading, so you might want to do it now.
We can't do it. The first reading.
Oh, if there are questions at that time.
Yeah.
Okay,
During the
sorry,
siting, yeah.
sorry.
Just clarifying.
Sorry,
things.
checking process.
That's all right. Process is important. So LRS does have a video they would like to show. So I guess we're going to be later on in the agenda to do that, to wrap all this up.
Yeah. And we should mention that it is in TIF 7.
Sorry. It is in the TIP district, which I know is very important to the city.
Correct.
Do you have any further comments?
Not at this time. I want to thank Walt for his effort, and it was an excellent summary.
Is there a motion? And then discussion?
I'll move to approve. Second.
Motion by Alderperson Wentz, second by Waldron. Discussion. And Mr. Williams.
Will you accept hazardous waste there?
Good question. No, that's specifically in the host agreement. Thanks for bringing that up. Now, the hydro excavation waste is considered a special waste because it's basically wet, not because of the constituents in it, which would be monitored before they would come to the transfer station, but everything, yes, no hazardous waste. And they do load checking requirements for that, and when they find something they shouldn't have, they properly manage it and get it off the site.
Thank you. Anything else? Mr. Went?
Yeah, we got a few questions. So you mentioned tip number 7.
Correct.
One of the things that we had talked about was the good thing about this going in is that it'll help alleviate some of that debt service we've got going within that. In a number of our other development agreements, we have provisions in there of a minimum tax that will be paid on it. Because I believe we've got some kind of pro forma that this will cover 75% or something of our.
Roughly.
I mean, rough end at back of an envelope type of thing. But we've then also had situations in which then there's appeals and appeals and appeals, and then all of a sudden the value of that property is much lower than what was originally built and anticipated, so that the amount of taxes that are collected is greatly reduced, and then that blows our pro forma. And so has there been any discussions on that, or is that ever I mean, I know this is unique because it's also in a TIF, and maybe you haven't run into that before, but.
So your specific question is?
A minimum property tax provision in the agreement.
We don't have that in there. It's typically not put in these. I would assume that they would be assessed and pay their fair share, but am I missing something?
No, I mean, several of our agreements do contain provisions within other TIFs that we have a minimum assessed valuation that is established at the time of the agreement. You know, and it's an insurance policy for the city that, you know, that the investment that went into the TIF is protected by the increments that are being generated in the event appeals take place, and they frequently take place, which then becomes legal counsel's burden to try and defend against those. The values, people will try to bring their assessed values down to lower their tax on the property, and as a result, the increment is no longer supporting the TIF. So that's the issue that the alderman is raising.
And that's happened many times in Moline, and so that's why we have these provisions in most of our development agreements now.
Yeah.
Is that something you're asking staff to consider then? or-
I can say on the record that during the course of the last 18 months, you know, that topic did not come up, I can assure you. There was no increment that was being requested or rebate, tax rebate being requested by LRS. So, you know, I'm not sure where council wants to go with that, but I would leave it up to council's judgment and, you know, let LRS, of course, discuss that with us.
Mr. Schmidt?
Would that be something we'd want to move forward with without an incentive attached to it? When the incentive is attached, that makes complete sense to me. But moving forward without, when that's not at play here, that's something I would have thought to do, and I'm curious if that's what you're thinking. I'm asking.
There's no reasoning why you have to be giving them money to have a minimum. We have limited amount of ground out in this TIF 7. We've got a big debt service that we're going to that we need to pay off, and you know, they're taking up 10 acres of it. And so we just need to make sure that that 10 acres is producing enough increment to pay off the TIF and help with whatever other things we want to do out in that area. And so it's not unusual at all. I mean, it may be unusual because it's a siting thing with a transfer station for waste, but for development agreements, River Station, we didn't have any incentive given back to them. We just built out everything around it, and they had a minimum a tax that they had to pay. So I mean, that's an example in Moline where there was no incentive given to them. It was because we provided all the utilities and the infrastructure to it at no cost.
Anything further?
I would point
Mr.
out that
Schmidt?
is an incentive.
Well, exactly. And so that's the reasoning for doing it. And I guess, are you looking for direction from us to tell you to have those conversations, or?
I mean, we haven't had those conversations to date, and I guess I would, you know, if it's the will of council to have that discussion with LRS, we would have that discussion with LRS.
I think we can
Because we
do
don't have
that.
like a separate development agreement. What we have is we have a hosting agreement, and I can understand why Walt said he hasn't seen that proviso in a hosting agreement. That would have to be a separate agreement, in my opinion.
Okay, so any kind of direction like that, we can deal with it under first reading as official business.
So you want to wait to, okay. I've got a few others.
Other questions, yeah,
Okay.
or comments?
I appreciate the hazard, but in the ordinance that is coming up, there's a provision in there that talks about incineration. I just want to make sure there's nothing in here that says that they will not do any incineration. Is that the intent, that there will be no incineration on this?
So, I'm glad you brought that up. The siting ordinance that we prepared is generic. So it could contemplate a municipal waste incinerator, a landfill. None of those do we think are very likely, even though your agency is talking about incineration. But the main reason we enacted it was for transfer stations, but while we were at it, we were like, well, we might as well cover any eventuality that you might have a siting application. So those provisions would not be applicable, but it is written for a broader pollution control facility in general.
Right, but within here, you say no hazardous, to Alderman Williams' point.
We could
which-
definitely put no incineration if.
Okay, I mean, I think,
But they wouldn't be permitted to do that, nor would they be proposing in their siting application incineration. If they were, then clearly there would be a disconnect between what they were telling you and what they did. So,
I don't disagree. And that's why, I'm an attorney, so I would rather have it on paper than that's just kind of our understanding.
Okay.
So, yeah. So it talks about screening. It just basically says screening necessary. Who makes that decision? Is that screening just a big wooden fence? Is that landscaping? Is that a berm? Is that, how does that, is it just the very minimum of what our landscaping ordinance is? Or is it, because it's, you know, landscaping for a building versus a landscaping for a trash dump-off facility probably is
Right.
something different.
so one of the things they have to do under criteria 3 under the property value impact is they typically will show what they're doing with the facility to harmonize its use within the area, which includes a landscape waste plan. So we would expect to see a landscape waste plan in the siting application, and you will have an opportunity to look at that landscape plan and make recommendations to improve it with special conditions. So that is something that they will be doing, and in fact, the video they show, I don't know if it really shows all the landscaping, but it kind of give you a sense for what's going to happen out there, and and typically there is plantings and berms and things to kind of shield the facility, so.
So
That
that'll
is
come
something that will
back
be
to us
coming
or to Plan Commission?
That comes to you only. There's no, so under the state law, the zoning process that you have is basically thrown out, and state law takes precedent. So we don't go through your zoning or your regional plan, all that, it comes directly to you, so.
Anything further, Mr. Wentz?
Yeah, so it talks about the turnoff lane, that, with the traffic study, you mentioned it earlier. Is that a turnoff lane off of 78? Is that a turnoff lane off of 47?
It's inside the property itself, so I think it's off of 47.
Off of 47th.
Yeah.
So does the traffic, I mean, because my concern is on 78th, you wind up with a bunch of additional trucks and stuff moving
No,
on.
we're
that.
not on that major road, we're inside the airport
No.
property.
Oh, no, I understand that,
Okay.
but the traffic, all of it is going to come from 78. So all
Oh,
the
I
traffic
see.
we have on 47 is traffic you're going to also have on 78.
Right.
Is that part of the traffic study at all? I mean, my concern is, adding an extra turn lane on 47th is going, I mean, there is no traffic on there because there's one building before it and farmland and a runway behind it. So I'm pretty sure your traffic study, if it's just on 47th, is gonna say, you don't need anything. There's never a car that drives past
Right.
this place.
So they will have hired and did hire a traffic expert. And they put together all the truck counts and then the grade of each of the roads that are gonna be used for the traffic coming in. Gap analysis, all that is done as part of their study. And they'll recommend improvements that they think are appropriate. And you always have the opportunity as a citing authority to say, well, we think maybe we'll special condition X, Y, and Z on that. So really, they do have that covered and have to have that covered.
Well,
to
I'm just concerned that the scope
demonstrate to
of
you.
the traffic study includes 78.
Yes, if that's the main road coming in, yes, they would
Okay,
have to consider
and then at
that.
that point, we can put additional.
Yep.
Your Honor.
Yes.
And I think
Sure.
LRS, during our preliminary meetings, was going to contact the county additionally to see what their needs or what the structure or integrity of 78th Avenue was.
Because that's a big concern. I mean, that's quite a bit of an increase of all turning all in one location and those sorts of things. And with that, is there any provision in it where it may not need it today, but it may need it in 15 years or 20 years? And so that becomes, because like I said, that whole area is not developed out at all. It is part of a TIF. There's a number of acres that will be hopefully developed within the next 15 years. And so how does that ongoing, I just don't want a situation where like, well, today, because we were the first ones in, we don't need any traffic at all or turn lanes, but.
Yeah. Typically, the traffic study will do, that I've seen, and I did not closely read this one yet in the application, but typically they'll do a future worst-case scenario and add traffic to the analysis to see if those road grades change or the gap analysis change. And so that's kind of a conservative estimate to look into the future. So it's typically brought into the traffic study.
And so it's all just brought, there's not a reassessment at any point in the future.
No.
Okay. Within the agreement, and you brought this up about the 24 hours for trailers that are tarped and put outside. But then it also has a provision in here regarding roll-offs. And while it talks about the roll-offs have to be tarped and covered, there's no provision in it that the stuff within it has to be emptied within 24 hours or anything like that.
Well, we do say there is no more than 24 hours except over holidays and weekends.
But that's for transfer trailers. It says waste may be kept temporarily outside in transfer trailers, which are tarped for no more than 24 hours.
Okay.
Except for holidays, blah, blah,
I
blah.
think that is something that we can easily change, because the intent is that any roll-off or transfer trailer would be covered.
Well, it says that it'll be covered, but does it have to be emptied within that 24-hour period of time?
That would also be something we can add.
Clear up.
Yep.
Okay, 'cause I figured that that's probably what you meant, but that's not what it says.
Yeah, because really the only reason they would need to store a truck overnight is because the landfill's closed.
Yeah.
They're gonna take it the next morning.
Yeah, and that's completely understandable and reasonable. I just want to make sure that it, because
Good
otherwise you could have a
Legal
situation where you
counsel.
got stuff
Yes.
in the roll-off that's sitting around and, there's a provision in there that says the city can allow more than 1,500 or 150,000 pounds or whatever. But it doesn't make clear, is that just the city administrator? Is that the city council? Is that the public works director? Who makes that decision? It is on,
If you could
sure. It is under H.
It's in the citing
No, under
ordinance.
I, sorry, on page 13. It says, this amount may be exceeded with written permission of the city.
Okay. We could get more specific if you'd like. Typically, what we do in these host agreements is we do cap them because they're gonna do their traffic analysis on that, and so that's our expected impact. so we can understand it when we're making that decision. But say they want to expand in the future, maybe 100 tons a day or whatever. What this provision does is basically says you don't have to go through siting again. You can come back to the city and get that approval. And that is a very common provision. The siting process is very expensive and long, and it takes a lot of your time to
So
just
that
get
kind
ready.
of approval comes back to the council,
Well,
then, just
yes.
because it's an agreement approval.
I would think we can make that clear that it would have to come back and get city council.
Okay, I would appreciate that, because we've had some things in the past where staff just
No,
said to go ahead and then we didn't find out about it.
we can trust Bob, but I don't.
Oh, I
We're
trust
fine,
Bob.
we're fine. Thank
I'm
you for
not the
that
one they're talking
information.
about.
Yeah, it predated Bob. And I guess the last one is, do you believe that the insurance provisions, I mean, $1 million per occurrence, I mean, I think that's what we have for somebody performing at Bass Street. That seems,
Well, we've got a combined limit of 5 million. We do have the environmental impact, additional insurance up to 2 million, but we felt it was adequate.
I mean, you do this all the time. It's just something that, we throw $1 million around all the time for.
No, I know, it's not
people
like,
that-
it's not what it used to be, right?
Exactly. And so for a facility that is this large over its end, I mean, if something kind of goes sideways or whatever, especially out by the airport, I just,
Got it.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you for those perspectives. I
Well,
think
it-
there was another hand
oh,
too.
then, yeah.
Did you have your hand? Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
And-
Yes, Mr.
And then the last, do you ever see like liquidated damages or daily penalties for not following the ordinance? I mean, within here, there's just the old standard, well, you can go at anything at equity or law. Well, that is super expensive, and what winds up happening is, I know we got a 30-day to cure and
Right.
be nice and everything, but that 30 days, typically when that's the only provision you've got, turns into 3-4 months, because when do you finally pull the trigger to spend all the money to force
Yeah.
the enforcement of the,
Now I've negotiated agreements where we do get stipulated damages, but the waste industry in general has basically said they're not gonna do that. They're not gonna agree to that anymore because they feel that the state has that authority to enforce these things, whereas I would counter, well, a lot of times the state takes a while to get some action. So we wanted, so at least these provisions at least get you the foot in the door to say, hey, what are you doing? We think you're violating the agreement. So we're not able to get stipulated damages.
okay, so they're just gonna say no if we ask for it. That's, okay. All right.
Mr. Waldron.
Yeah, I just want to thank LRS for their work on this, and I want to thank your work on this too, Walter. It was excellent. LRS has been a good partner so far in the negotiations. I'm sure they'll take into regard everything that Alderman Went has brought up. And like Bob said, this has taken 18 months, and I think it's going to be a wonderful project for Moline. And as the chairman of RICMA, the city has actually stepped up and made Rickham whole, so they don't lose even more money. And so, and then potentially 2 drop-off recycling sites. It looks like a very good win-win for the city, Rickham, LRS, and I want to thank people involved who have brought this to us. So it's a good project.
Thank you.
Mr. Went.
When that conversation with the second site, is that something that is going to be controlled by Lake Shore?
Correct.
And they're
Owned
clean
and
now?
operated.
They will have to,
Yes.
So we could have it within the city of Moline in that.
If you could, as I told the people on Rickham board today, if we can find a host.
Yeah. With those provisions, I think so.
So I need to ask corporate counsel, I may have just in my mind when I said we could amend anything, it, on the regular council meeting, should it pass right now, but we're not in an informational, this is a cow item.
You're right.
So what is our better process, because it would seem to me, you know, in this, if I'm understanding correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, the council can make some amendments, but it will still have to go back
Correct.
between first reading and a second final reading for agreement from LRS and the parties involved. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so making amendments now is fine in the cow.
You could.
Okay, so what would, I guess, I'm assuming you have an
Yeah,
amendment, Mr.
well,
Went.
if that's the case, then I guess would move to direct staff to work with LRS? LRS on a minimum assessment or a minimum tax paid per year on the property.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderperson Waldron. Discussion on the amendment. I think we understand what you're getting at. Thank you.
Minimum assessed value.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, that amendment passes. Minimum tax paid per year. Thank you.
We have a presentation too from LRS, yeah.
Yes, I
Sounds like all
understand.
the other stuff is part of the process, so. we can-
Okay.
Yeah, we can
Thank
clean up
you.
the other stuff.
Anything further
Thank you.
on this item 6.2? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council.
As amended. All right, we're at 6.3. An ordinance amending Chapter 35 zoning and land development, Article 1, Division 2, Section 35-1203, definitions of the Moline Code of Ordinances by revising certain definitions related to nonconformities, amending Article 3, Division 1, entitled In General, dealing with the same subject matter, and Article 5, Division 3, entitled Illumination Standards for Internal Consistency. Mr. Vietlock?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Before you this evening is a ordinance that was approved by the Plan Commission unanimously. This addresses kind of the longstanding issue that we have had with some confusion in our ordinance about how do we handle those properties that are doing interior remodels where their site may not be in compliance with certain sections of our ordinance. Specifically looking at things like landscaping, lighting, parking, things like that. So what this ordinance actually does is that it clearly states that if you are doing an interior remodel over a certain percentage amount, that you do have to come into compliance with our development standards that are located in Article 5 of our zoning ordinance. So this would address the concerns that have been about with like Planet Fitness and some of the other ones. What this ordinance does is that it clarifies and and puts everything on the same playing field. So right now we have in our ordinance a couple places where it's done in a proportional manner. So if you're doing more than 25% of the value of the property, you have to come into compliance with that same percentage of our standards. That's how our landscape ordinance is written. What this does is all of our design standards that are located in Article 5 would have that similar percentage. So anything under 25%, you would not have to come to compliance. 25 to 75%, you'd have to come into whatever that percentage is. Anything more than 75% would be 100% compliance. So again, we believe that this will address the issue, get rid of some of the concerns that we've had, and hopefully make it a little bit more clear for our development community and what the expectations of this community are. So
Thank you.
that'll pause for any questions.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second?
Motion by Alderperson Went, second by Alderperson Timian. Discussion. Mr. Went.
Yeah, thank you very much for doing this. Obviously, I've been chomping at the bit to get this moving, so thank you very much. Couple of questions, just clarification. Within this, an improvement, does this also trigger the requirement if, let's say, they don't have a sidewalk? Or there's supposed to be a bike path that was built or anything like
It would
that?
not, because that is not actually under Article 5. The only way that would be is if they were doing any type of subdivision action where they would actually have to come, at that point, they'd have to put in a sidewalk.
Well, because that had been something that we've, I think, given direction a number of times. So if that's maybe step 2, can you guys do that and come back
Yep.
with
Yeah, we certainly can
with
look
that
into,
provision?
we can look into what we can do on that, for that
Okay.
issue, absolutely.
Anything further?
We've got a couple of things.
Okay, Mr. Went.
Okay. And maybe this is adjacent to it, within 3111, there's a provision regarding abandonment, that if a property has been, the use hasn't been done for more than 12 months for whatever reason, we had run into some issues where previous staff had interpreted that said if they have it for sale, even though there was no use happening in it, and the plain language of the thing seems pretty straightforward, but they said if you were marketing it in any way, shape, or form, you held on to that use. Is that,
We have not made any changes to what would define a nonconformity. So what's currently in the ordinance it remains.
Do you think that
has
needs to be-
become an issue that we're dealing with? I know, yes, previous staff that was, and that is a fairly common thing you see in ordinances. Our ordinance, as far as I could tell, doesn't have that. So if there would have been that interpretation, I would have been interested to know where it came from, because our ordinance doesn't speak to that as far as I'm aware.
I couldn't agree with you more. Do you think that that's something that while we're cleaning this up, and this is just on the cow, when it gets brought back, maybe some clarification on that section?
I would be
If you could run-
reticent to add anything at this point, because Plan Commission has sent forward
Oh, okay.
this package. If we were adding anything else, it would need to go back to Plan Commission.
Okay.
That being said, we certainly can add that for an item to study.
Okay. There's another provision in here regarding a parking lot. And the language says that if there is a full replacement, this happens. But what happens if there's a partial replacement? I just don't want a situation where somebody is like, wow, if I replace all 100% of this thing, now I have to meet all these landscaping requirements, and I got to do all my lighting and everything, but I'll do 90% and just won't do this little corner over here, and now I don't have to do anything.
My understanding is that the ordinance speaks similar, that if it's more than 25%, then they would have to come into proportional.
I'm not sure that that's actually what it says.
I would need to refer to.
Because it talks about, like, for a parking lot or whatever, that if there's an increase by 50%, that triggers it.
You're right, yes.
Or if there is a full reconstruction, but that's where
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the Goldilocks zone.
Okay.
That somebody winds up in the middle of something like that and then says, "Ha, I'm safe."
Yeah,
And-
we can look into that, certainly.
Okay, and I'll send you the.
Thank you. There's a lot in that ordinance.
Yeah,
And there's
100%.
time for it to
Yeah,
work
exactly.
its way
So
through. or
I'll
for
send that to you.
amend
That
it.
was just one that I wanted to make sure that I understood.
Appreciate
Thank
that.
you. Anything further from the council? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. We move to our informational, 7.1 16th Street and Avenue of the City's Intersection Project. Mr. Dryer, is he online?
You should be online.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yep, we'll get you up on screen shortly.
All right.
You got people in the room.
We ready?
Yep, we're ready. Are you turning on your screen or no?
No, I just have audio.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that works.
So, good evening, everyone. This is just a quick informational item pertaining to the modifications of the intersection of 16th and Avenue of the Cities. You will recall this intersection was an item of interest during the budget discussions for the 2023 CIP. And given the level of interest at that time, we thought this would be a good time to give an update. The intersection was reviewed by our engineering consultant, GHA, and what you should have before you tonight is a revised version of the design concept with the modification brought forward from recommendations of our Complete Streets group, which met just this past Friday. You may recall that the original project was estimated at $1.25 million and involved reconstruction of all four corners of the intersection well in advance of the intersection on the approaches. And with the revised scope of work, GHA has been able to reduce the cost to about $870,000. The revised version of the project modifies predominantly the northeast and northwest corners of the intersection while improving the corners on all four corners of the intersection, improving the ramps. And overall, we were able to reduce the amount of pavement in front of Whitey's dramatically improving that corner. We also modified the terrace and increased space in front of the Rancherita restaurant. And, no access to the adjoining business properties has been changed, and it all remains. So overall, the proposed project makes the intersection more ped-friendly by shortening ped crossing lengths and by meeting ADA requirements. And essentially, we increased the sidewalk terrace area in the range of about 1,300 square feet. So that was just an update of action on that intersection so far to date.
Thank you. Questions from council, Alderperson Moyer.
Thank you. So I just heard you say that you were shortening the pedestrian crosswalks. Are those rectangles that are kind of on the outside? Are you basically moving them back about 6 feet?
Yes, they don't have them marked as the white ladders in these drawings, but they're pulled back, so they're a little more, they're shorter and in a tighter portion of the intersections. The black boxes on the curb radii are kind of like the ADA accessible ramp symbols.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Went.
So I appreciate what is being shown here, because I know that we had that conversation regarding the eastbound section, because I think what's in our packet actually has, still has that 13-foot lane.
Exactly. That was sent to Janine late last week. Then we had our meeting with Complete Streets Friday. So you should have something that shows a bump out on the southeast corner that reduces that crossing by a few feet. It's about the best we could do there, and then still chase the curb back to the existing curb without running hundreds of, dozens of feet down the street.
That's great. I appreciate it, because I know that that was one of the things, because that reduces the pedestrian walk somewhat. With the north and south, did we look into, or did we make a determination that those have to be 12-foot lanes?
Well, we looked at that, and to reduce that width, you have to start running that curb further back away from the intersection, because they're on the upstream approach generally. And so you're going to start getting into that $1.25 million range as you start chasing those curbs back. So I was comfortable modifying that southeast corner there to try to shorten that distance a bit. But we're trying to keep the costs down, and so that's what we were comfortable with there. You're right, 12, generally we would use 11s and the 12s, but they're existing there today, so.
Mr. Went.
Yeah, I mean, my concern, and I've shared this with you, so I might as well share it here. I mean, 12-inch lanes are highway width. I mean, we do not need 12-inch or 12 feet lanes. Yeah, we definitely don't need 12-inch lanes.
That's right.
I understood what you meant.
And so if reducing, I mean, from the north-south, I mean, you could reduce 3 feet or so. I mean, that's 8-9%.
But I agree with you. But if you do that, you have to start chasing those distances further south from the intersection, and that's where your costs start going up. Is when you increase those lengths of moving that curb to get the taper change. You need to move that construction further south, and that's when your costs start going up. So if we were to build the intersection today, we'd probably go with 11 foot, but we have the 12 here, and it's kind of what we're looking at.
All right. I just from my standpoint, if we're going to do this, I prefer we do it right. I mean, the number of people who cross that intersection for football games to go over to Whitey's from all those neighborhoods. This clearly will improve. I mean, without that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but it's just increasing the costs, and we're going to need probably a little more money for 16th Street further to the south, and we're hoping to be able to use some of that savings at that location there. So it's just a function of savings.
Thank you, Mr. Driver. Anything further from council? Questions? Mr. Macias?
Yes, thank you. In between Hardee's and Rancherita, that middle section that's in there with the slanted lines,
On 23rd?
yes.
Yes, that's pavement marking. So if you have a school bus or a larger vehicle, they'll be able to sweep over that.
Gives them the
Thank
radius
you.
they need.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you very much for that information. We'll look forward to this coming onto an agenda soon for
That
approval.
was my pleasure.
Thank you. And with that, we'll close out our committee of the whole and move to our council meeting. Pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there an invocation, Alderperson Timian?
There is not.
Okay, roll call, please.
Alderperson Williams,
Present.
Macias,
Present.
Went,
Present.
Timian,
Present.
Moyer,
Present.
O'Brien,
Present.
Waldron,
Present.
Schmidt.
Present.
Your Honor, I request approval of Committee of the Whole and Council meeting minutes of January 10th, 2023, and appointments made during Committee of the Whole this evening, January 17th, 2023. Resolutions. Council Bill 1006-2023, a resolution approving and accepting proposed changes to prior contract language as agreed to by and between the negotiators for the City of Moline, the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, UAW, Local 2282, relating to wages, hours of work, and certain other conditions of employment for the contract term January 1, 2023 through December 31, 2025, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to an agreement incorporating said changes with the UAW Local 2282 relating to wages, hours of work, and certain other conditions of employment. Council Bill 1008-2023, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to a proposal for professional engineering services with Jewalt Hamilton Associates, GHA, for traffic signal design and ADA improvements for project number 1426, 1427, traffic signal replacement at 16th Street and 36th Avenue and 41st Street and 32nd Avenue respectively, for an amount not to exceed $64,950. Council Bill 1011-2023, a resolution authorizing certain minutes and portions of minutes of executive sessions of the City Council to be maintained as confidential until further review by the City Council, and authorizing the remainder of said executive session minutes referenced herein to be made available for public inspection.
Was 13.2 omitted intentionally?
Which one?
13.2, 1007, 2023.
Thank you for catching that.
Oh, thank
Was
you.
it?
Thank
Let me
you.
read that.
1007, 13.2.
Oh, sorry, it's right here. Council Bill 1007-2023, a resolution authorizing the city administrator to modify the non-union employee group benefit package to incorporate the changes as set forth in Exhibit A attached hereto relating to wages and health insurance premiums.
Move to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Motion by Alderperson Wentz, seconded by Alderperson Moyer. Roll call, please.
Alderperson Timian.
Aye.
Moyer.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Waldron.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Macias.
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays, and that motion passes. Non-consent agenda, second reading ordinances. Council Bill 3001-2023, an ordinance amending Chapter 35 zoning and land development, Section 35-1203 definitions of the Moline Code of Ordinances by repealing subsection 104 family in its entirety and acting in lieu thereof one new subsection 104 family dealing with the same subject matter, amending Article 3 zoning by enacting one new Division 9 entitled Accessory Dwelling Units, and amending Chapter 8 Buildings and Other Construction and Building Services, Section 8-7202C of the Moline Code of Ordinances by repealing Section 8-7202C in its entirety and acting in lieu thereof one new Section 8-7202C dealing with the same subject matter.
Is there a
Motion to approve.
Motion by Alderperson Timian, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderperson Moyer. 1 second, I'll be right to you. I'm gonna give a little preamble, as I did at our budget work session. I wanna remind our council and our community that everyone here has been dedicated to community work, and we all care about Moline. That is not a question. And in this council, we've also talked about everyone here wants to be responsible, but reasonable people can disagree, and I encourage us all to stay reasonable. We have heard, and we've heard testimony, we've listened to phone calls, we've listened to, corresponded by email for both proponents and detractors from this. So I just want to put that out there as the context in which we should be speaking with one another and the community today. Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Your Honor. I think that as I look at the addition of accessory dwelling units and the opportunities we have to move forward, to me, it becomes an issue that comes back to the property rights and allowing people who are homeowners here to have flexibility with how they are going to control their own property, their own destinies in their homes. I think that I've heard from people in favor and opposed, and I generally am very supportive of bringing this type of housing to Moline. However, I do hear the greatest level of concern coming up specifically about standalone or detached accessory dwelling units. And I think that is the type of this housing that I'm least interested in. I think it is the type that with the other types, through conversion or through subdividing into one's own home, provides that greatest level of flexibility and opportunity for people to get involved. But that I think the concerns about the standalone units have resonated the most with me. So I make a motion to amend the ordinance to prohibit construction of standalone or detached accessory dwelling units.
Is there a second?
A point of information.
Yes.
Where is that within, I mean, there's a conversion, if it's been there for 10 years. I think that they left the new construction out of what's being proposed from us. Is that correct? I just don't want to amend something that's already not there.
So I guess two things. I'll go back to Alderperson Schmidt here for a second. When you were saying, so you were saying that your amendment would be that there would be no detached accessory dwelling units that would be permitted.
No
The only way,
construction of detached.
no construction. What about conversion? If there's someone who has an existing.
Conversion of garage.
Okay, like a standalone garage.
Yes.
Okay. So when the
Existing
ordinance,
structures,
yes.
not.
So what the Plan Commission placed in the ordinance was a 10-year window. So basically, somebody would not be able to build a brand new structure on the property and immediately convert it into ADU. It would have to have.
That's right.
It would have to have aged at least 10 years. So.
They already did that job for us.
So that was their way to address that
So
concern.
would you like to
I'll withdraw that.
withdraw it then?
Okay. I just didn't want to give you a big debate
That's
on.
okay, there's a lot going on.
Something that's
We
not
are
there.
very busy, that is just fine, thank you. All right, so we're still at discussion. Yes, Mr. O'Brien?
I will not be supporting this. When I went door to door, I don't recall people saying, you know what we need, Pat? We need ADUs. We need, which will come. Your amendment was, well, I mean, I think you were correct on your amendment because it's going to come. We know it's coming. The landlords are going to, flock here, and we're going to have all these accessory dwelling units. It's not going to, your taxes aren't going to go down, despite what we've heard. It's going to make, it's going to be great for taxes. We'll be able to, get more revenue. I just see this as the beginning of the end for property values. You talk about people being flexible with the property. This is going to make property values plummet. I will not support this. I think it's a horrible idea. And we don't have the staff to enforce this. And I don't see us hiring the staff to enforce this because we can't keep up with what we have now. So.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Mr. Vlook, I'm sorry, you might want to stay close. I just want to clarify, these are owner occupied, so you can't just have landlords coming and buying up houses and creating ADUs in them.
That is correct.
So-
Property owner has to either live in the primary, under this proposed ordinance, would have to live either in the primary home or in the accessory unit.
Great.
And we think this is enforceable.
Wait, you don't have the floor right now, but I'm getting to that. Secondly, there was no mention of tax income as one of the driving forces in any of the presentations
Not that I was
we've
aware
heard
of.
of. Thank
Not
you.
that I was aware of.
And number three, enforcement. I know we've had discussions. Can you talk about or help us, remind me, and maybe share with them where we're at with the program we did initiate, which was to invest in rental housing inspectors and a coordinator for that?
Sure, I'm happy to speak to that. We, as of today, have hired internally through promotion a staff member who you know, Holly Jackson, who is going to be the coordinator, rental housing program coordinator. We have yet to bring on board the rental housing program inspector. It's a two-person operation as approved in the budget for fiscal '23. Given the volume, and I have to be frank, I have to be honest, because the staff knows, I've had a lot of discussions with them on this. Given the sheer volume of units that are out there that we know of, two people's not gonna cut it unless we reduce the frequency of inspection, and that number is yet to be determined. If we had two people, given the sheer volume that we have now, I know that if that number stands, then we would have two people in the field doing 20 inspections a day, every day. Which means that working an 8-hour day, it's not gonna cut it. If they're gonna really do the job, and there's no drive-by inspections, these are actual inspections. So that's probably my biggest concern, is how to implement this cost-effectively, because I know other cities have a difficult time with it as well. I mean, Davenport, the city the size it is, has 6 people, and it's inadequate. They don't have enough. So as we venture down the road, and I'm not gonna pick a side on this issue, financially and administratively, trying to run the program is going to be difficult. And the challenge that's out there is a challenge that can be overcome, but it might eventually take more staff than just 2 people. And I know we capped our hiring at 400 or 402 this year. And I respect and honor that level. We're not going to go over that level in 2023.
Thank you.
So, just my thoughts.
Mr. O'Brien.
My friend across the aisle from me here he did tonight present a lot of hypotheticals, and that's fair. That's fair to present hypotheticals. But these are hypotheticals that are, in my opinion, these are real things that could happen with this. I see, we insist that the people that live have to be the owners of the property, and, I've seen this before. I've seen this before we even had any kind of rental ordinance. You've got people that will own property that say, yeah, I live there. I mean, in my mind, that's just gonna be something that's gonna be hard to enforce. I don't know if you could speak to that.
There are ways to enforce it, but yes, admittedly, it is a difficult thing to do. But it's a common requirement around the country for these ADUs. And the intent again is that we're trying not to, have folks that are, absentee landlords. I mean, there are ways we could look at it. We could look at how the county assessor assesses the property. Is there a homestead exemption on it? You could look at what the utility bill is. Now, granted, again, utility bill, you could have that address and someone could come and pick up a mail, but at the same time, that's an awful lot of effort for somebody to necessarily go into. But yes, I mean, you're exactly right, that would become an issue, and that is a concern that staff has, is, we don't want to be the people asking, well, who lives there, and
Right.
do you actually own the property?
And then, and then Mr.
I
Williams.
just got a follow-up. So I got 2.5 acres of land up here. If I decide I'm going to build a bigger garage, I need more space. I got another lot. I build this garage, and then I decide, well, cousin Clara to move in, you know, I think you have to be related, or if
No.
grandma or somebody. I want grandma to, or whoever to move in down, you know, my new garage. I have to wait 10 years. I have to like approach the city and, you know, say, hey, I'm gonna wanna use this property for an ADU, but I have to wait 10 years to put somebody in there.
That is what is being proposed, is that
The-
yes, you would
the
have to wait.
structure will have had to exist.
The
for
structure
10
has to
years.
exist for
Now
at
you
least
have to
10
wait
years.
10
Yeah,
years.
no, you don't have to
from
wait
that.
10 years,
So
but
put an
the structure
application in
itself
there.
has to exist at least 10 years.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
I want to thank Paula Nab, Jody Fisk, and Vicki Graves for speaking, and Diane Moore to echoing her sentiment for them. You know, you spoke about property rights, and it is about property rights to the extent that people that already own their homes, that bought into a neighborhood with single-family housing, and now they're going to have it divided up. We do a terrible job with our rental properties, abysmal as far as rental inspections. You just see all the trash that people throw out that blow across the neighborhoods that stay there for weeks at a time. We have put the cart before the horse here, and we should get our rental properties in line because we'll discover more problems. And as Bob brought up, we'll need even more manpower to really address that, to ask the hard questions and do the investigations and move people along. This type of thing for a neighborhood in Moline would just beat it up terribly. It'll hurt the resale of current homes if you want to sell your house, but there's a rental property, a guy's quadded a garage, and legally or illegally, you're going to have a lot of the people that own rental properties that aren't good landlords are going to allow these places to become ADUs, even though they're really not. They're going to see it as a blanket approval. That's just a practical app on the street. This is the single biggest issues in my almost 4 years as an alderman. I had 34 calls against, 0 for. And it stretches the whole gamut of individuals. We've got a lot of professionals here that have spoken against it, to include the chairman of our own planning commission, and they voted 9-1 against it. It's not about what we want or what we think necessarily is the best for the city. We don't place ourselves before our citizens. We're supposed to represent them. And even at the you know, when the mayor spoke to the community, and it was great that we had the outreach, the vast majority of those people were against the ADUs. I mean, there's some that were open to the idea of maybe having those, but I don't think they serve Moline. They certainly don't serve our citizens, and they've made it quite clear they don't want them. So for us to vote for it is to go against them. And I just think that's not good government, as you would say, Mr. Wayne.
Mr.
So
Simeon.
I would encourage you to vote against it.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to remind that we did have these outreaches, and I was at both of them. And a lot of people in this council chamber were not. And so if we were really interested in listening to people and hearing the ideas, being at those meetings is a good first step. And I don't want to sit here and say, or hear that we're not listening and we're not being involved. I'm going to meetings, I'm doing these things, I'm talking to the people in the ward. And we might disagree, but who's showing up to these events? I've been in Moline almost all my life, and well, that's not true. I was raised here, moved away, came back. Doesn't matter. I have a lot of memories in Moline, and I've been thinking a lot about what Moline was when I was a kid. And in the early 90s, Moline had about 44,000 people. We had the Great Flood of '93, if you remember. Average household income was $35,000. That year, Bill Clinton was inaugurated as president. Jeff Foxworthy was a top comedian. The top movies were Free Willy, Sister Act, and Barney debuted. And the zoning code was almost identical as it is now. We have moved on. We have changed our tastes, our standards, and I think that it's time for us to do the same thing with our zoning code. We cannot be held in the past with antiquated ideas about who should live where. That is not our job as legislators, to dictate who can live where. The opposition I hear is not about zoning as much as it is about who is living in my neighborhood, and that is not our job. We are not those people. And I will be supporting this because I believe in progress, and I'm doing it for, not for the Moline of today, but for the Moline of the future. And I want to remind everyone that this is a very restrictive ADU code. It is easier to build a new duplex in Moline than to build an ADU. There are fewer restrictions on putting a duplex on an empty lot than putting an ADU in your own backyard. So for everyone that thinks that they're just gonna pop up everywhere, just look at the feasibility of what's in this code. It is not gonna happen. Thank you.
Anyone else on council? Mr. Went, then Mr. Macias.
A couple of things. Just to put a little finer point on what Alderman Timian said about the duplex. It's true. By right, if there's an empty lot, we just had a duplex that was basically built for Mrs. Gow and Father Marabelli up there, and it's just by right, permitted, no problem. So the idea of density and those sorts of things, if done correctly, I think this can be done. Now, with that said, I'm going to start off, I'll make a motion to improve this. So if it does pass, it's better than it is currently. So one of the provisions in here says that if you're going to build an ADU, that you have to have an additional off-street parking spot for that ADU. But what it doesn't address is if you do a conversion of an existing garage and basically take away 2 off-street parking spots, you don't have to replace them. And it doesn't have a provision that your house currently meet the required off-street parking, because we have homes in town that don't have off-street parking. So I guess the motion I'll start off with is that in the event that you put an ADU on a home, that not only do you have to provide the one parking spot, if you convert or anything, any parking spots that you convert are additional off-street parking spots that you have to do, and the home itself has to provide the number of off-street parking that, as if the property was built today to meet the code.
Second.
Motion by Alderperson Went, seconded by Alderperson Moyer. Motion to amend that was correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Mr.
one
Went,
of my
and then
concerns
Mr. Schmidt.
and talking with a number of people out there is that this is going to increase parking in my in the neighborhood in some of the most densely populated areas. And I have to remind you that we do have a lot coverage area restriction in Moline, which anybody who I've talked with, nobody has mentioned it at all, that we can only cover so much of our lot. And so the concerns of in a lot of these densely populated areas, you know, I walk around Garfield all the time. If somebody tried to build an ADU on there, they would blow apart the lot coverage area. They would never be able to do it. And so, but I completely understand with the off-street parking and those sorts of things. So this is, if this is going to move forward, while it may restrict more lots from being able to build ADUs, it protects the neighborhood and neighbors from parking spilling out because they have covered up garage spaces or not provided the off-street parking that they should have to begin with.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt?
Yeah, I'm supportive of the direction we're going there. I guess the question I bring forward is it simpler to simply say that if they build an ADU, that they would be able to meet that minimum number +1 for the ADU? Because the way it's worded with, if you take away your garage spots, but what if your garage spots weren't part of your necessary, like your mandatory number, right? You have 4 spaces of driveway +2 in the garage. And then, so you took away the garage spots, but you actually still have enough to meet the codes.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but from my standpoint, those were spots that were being used as off-street parking before, and as the neighborhood kind of evolved and created equilibrium, those were spots that people were parking in. They need to be replaced.
Okay.
So it's more restrictive than maybe you would like, but I think that that's a balancing from what I've heard to, if this is gonna move forward, to protect those other people in the neighborhood looking for parking spots on the street.
Thank you. Mr. Waldron?
This is just my comment reference this amendment. I'll have,
To the amendment, yeah.
right. I'll have
You're
more
saving the best for
I'll
last.
save the best for last. I actually probably would support that because it makes it more restrictive to do these ADUs. So in that regard, I would support that. So when it comes around to vote no, ultimately, don't be shocked that I supported this. That said, I have to go back to Alderman O'Brien's comments. Who's enforcing this? Who is going to go out there and determine Margaret has this many parking space now, she's got an ADU, who's going to add it? You talk about just the rental housing inspection, now you're going to count parking spots? While I'll support this, I don't know how it'll ever be enforced. We have a difficulty now with our police department to go up and ticket people on the roads for, they're parked illegally, they're parked more than 24 hours. I just don't see how this is going to be enforceable. I will support it because it makes the ADUs even more restrictive. So I just want to make that comment. That's why I
Thank
started
you.
with that.
Yes, Mr. Beatlow.
I can address that a little bit, Alderperson. So the main way that this would be enforced or would be counted is during the SUP process. That's something I also want to kind of make sure that everyone is aware of, is that unlike most of our other peer communities that have ADU ordinances on the books, we would be very similar to Bettendorf in where that we would require special use permits for this. As part of that, one of the things we would be looking at is the parking. My team would be looking at that and would be ensuring that, okay, if you are going to do this, how many spaces do you have? How many would you require? And all of that. The nice part about it being an SUP is that if we get a complaint, parking is spilling out into the streets or, things like that, we have now two ways we can enforce it. We can work through the police department. We can also work through the SUP because that is an actual permit that would be issued with conditions on it. And part of that would be, one of those conditions would be you have to maintain the parking that's required. So we would be able to enforce it through our zoning action as well. So there's two prongs that we could enforce this if it became an issue, so.
Thank you. Here, is this regarding the amendment?
It
Yes,
is,
Mr. Timian?
Thank you, Your Honor. My understanding is that the garage conversions were one of the most cost-effective ways to allow my mother to age in place in my home and her own residence. By now saying I need to add 2 new parking spots to my house, I've increased the project cost 10, 20 grand, maybe? Okay, maybe that's
Not
okay.
necessarily.
And the intention is to make this harder. I think what it's doing is just saying, we don't like it. And we're taking cost-effective ways of doing it, and we're making it more expensive. So now, every single method is just becoming more and more prohibitively expensive.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen.
Yeah, well, yes, depending, if you've got a postage size slot, and you can barely fit everything in, yes, maybe it might become more cost prohibitive, but then you probably can't do the lot coverage area
Maybe not be
anyway.
able to do it, yeah.
But having off-street parking, it's a parking pad, or parking, if you've got a driveway, say, okay, well, you can park there, and you can park there, and you can park. You just have to make sure that you have that enough, those numbers of spaces. In some instances, you're absolutely correct. They may have to pour an extra pad. But in that neighborhood, I think that that's a balancing thing that is completely reasonable, that you're adding this additional dwelling unit there, that there's an additional place for people to park off-street so you don't wind up taking up all your neighbors' parking spots.
Thank you. Mr. Are you still talking about the amendment?
No,
We'll
I'll
stick to
just
the
wait,
amendment
yep.
first. Okay, amendment? Yes, Mr. Schmidt.
Just making sure I have a point of clarification for Mr. Beatlow. If the amendment does not pass, then this is still about the amendment, would under the current ordinance as it is written, would it require the consideration of an additional parking space with that ADU?
Yes.
I thought that was the case. Thank you.
Yes.
Just one.
Okay, and I have a question for Corporation Counsel. Because this did not pass Plan Commission, it would need a supermajority for passage tonight at second reading. Does that require a supermajority for any amendments to it?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right. On that amendment to, could you restate it? Include the one additional parking space and any off-street parking that's required for lots today.
As well as commensurate replacement of off-street spots that may be no longer utilized because the ADU has been created,
Yeah,
such as a garage conversion.
okay, got it. Roll call, please.
Alderperson Timian,
Nay.
Moyer,
Aye.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Nay.
Williams,
Nay.
Macias,
Aye.
Went,
Aye.
4 ayes, 4 nays.
No. I was, can you please read it one more
Yeah.
time? Read it out?
I'm sorry.
Read
what
out the
was-
votes, who
Oh,
did the
you-
what votes? I was
you were
tracking
aye.
something
You were nay.
different.
Alderman Timian was nay, Moyer, aye, O'Brien, aye, Waldron, aye, Schmidt, nay, Williams, nay, Macias, aye, Went, nay.
Oh, I'm an.
No, he's
I'm
an
so
aye.
sorry, so sorry.
I'm the one that
That's
wanted it to
right.
begin
Exactly,
with.
so that's what I
Although I have
had.
voted against myself.
It was
Five ayes, 3 nays, and that motion
Great.
passes.
Thank you, that motion passes. That amendment passes, sorry. Okay, further discussion, Mr. Macias.
Yes, a couple things. First, this is a very niche thing, and I don't believe that everybody's gonna run out and do these. Being owner occupied, even if you're renting it out to somebody, you live right there, so you're not gonna want anybody who's a problem or whatnot. So this is really providing more regulation and giving us more to work with than what we currently have. Currently, I don't run as much as I used to, but when I used to run, I would see them. Glen Oaks I've seen them there. Old Town, Flores Hinton neighborhood. I've seen garages converted over by Kmart up in that area. I don't know what neighborhood that is. So I've seen them. They're all over the city. And I don't think any of those places have issues with them. Again, I don't expect this to be something that people are just gonna go out because it is very niche. I know somebody made a point about the cost. And this addition of the parking would also make it so that, you know, it's not taking parking away from the neighbors, more respectful to the neighbors. But I did want to also point something out. I did attend one of the meetings, and I was taken back at some of the comments that were made. In particular, allowing this, but not in the west side of Moline. Stuff like that. I grew up in the west end of Moline, and I know those comments are thinly veiled at not having certain people in certain areas. And I know for a fact that when the people were saying those things, they didn't realize what they were saying, but those are very insensitive, kind of otherness of people, and that's not the Moline that I want. That's not the Moline we should strive for. If it's about the building of these buildings and whatnot, that's fine. But when we start dictating who should have these and who shouldn't, we're getting off on the wrong subject. And as a legislator, I believe this needs to be called out, and we shouldn't be having those discussions. And that's,
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to point that out.
Anything further on this motion?
On the amendment?
No, we already did the amendment. Yes.
Thank you, Your
Mr.
Honor.
Waldron.
Alderman O'Brien and Alderman Williams especially got my topics already, along with the folks from the crowd. Just some general comments for myself. I'm not a fan of putting grandma in my garage. I just don't know that Moliners want grandma in a garage. I realize you can make a garage look very nice, but that's not where I'm putting my deceased mother now. But I'm not sure I want Moline to be known for the place where you put grandma in the garage. We talked about standards we want. That's just not a standard I want. So that's just one point. My second point, and Alderman Williams touched on it, we have a plan commission. Alderman Wendt was on that plan commission for many, many years. They work hard. They take a look and go in depth for the issues for us so that we don't have to sit here and do that work for 4 or 5 hours. We have excellent people on those boards who do their work. What was their vote? 8-1. or 9-1 or whatever it was. But it was clearly, they've come to that decision. Like Alderman Williams, all the input I got was negative. I did not have one proponent for it. And I say, if we aren't happy with this, we should listen to our plan commission. That's what they're there for. If we're just gonna take an 8-1 or 9-0 or 9-1 vote, whatever it was, and just toss it behind our backs, I think we should disband the plan commission, and we ought to take these issues up on our own floor here. Easy for me to say because I'm leaving in 3 months. So I'll hedge that. But that's what the plan commission is for. Have we overvoted them before? Yes.
I know you have.
And I have. But typically, those are 5-4 votes, 6-3. They're not generally 8-1s or 9-1 or whatever the vote was. So listen to your plan commission. The plan commission didn't want it. I think the majority of the Moliners don't want it. And please, I implore you to vote no on this issue. Thank you.
Anything further? Mr. Wynn?
Just a point of clarification on that last point, on overturning what the plan commission has done. The one and only time I've been involved with it, it was a unanimous vote the other way. So, including Alderman Waldron. So, I understand it happens from time to time. I've been on plan commission, and I'm sure when I was on plan commission, the city council overrode us from time to time. It's not something that's happened often. Like I said, it's only happened once in the 8 years that I've been on. But when it did happen, it was not a close vote. It was unanimous because the way that this council viewed that issue was very different than the way that the plan commission. To your point about the number of people who have.
Point of order, Your Honor.
Oh.
Are we going to debate back and forth? If I make an argument,
Thank you very
point.
much. It's actually engaging in personalities to direct your
No,
comments directly to one person.
It's clarifying facts that was stated that there were 5-4 votes. That was not true. So I'll move forward.
Thank you.
When speaking to the number of people who spoke out against it to me, because I had a mix of people, clearly a mix. To Alderman Macias's point, the against was a very specific demographic in our community. The for raised the gamut, for me anyway. Now again, that I did not do a consensus of everything, but I think some of the concern is that has been communicated to me is, yes, you're right. You've heard from one demographic a lot of no's, but you're not hearing from other demographics in the community. And so that is just a comment from my own experience that I have heard from the gamut. And part of it is I probably have gone out and solicited it from more people than just receiving it. Now, with that said, I'm going to offer up another amendment. And I think it may be something that you might be interested in as well. I would like to increase the violations from no less than 500 up to no less than 1,000, and up to $1,500 for each violation. Each day a violation continues will constitute a new and separate offense.
Second.
I thought I'd get you on that one too.
All right, motion by Alderman Went, Alderperson Went, seconded by Waldron. Discussion.
To the comments regarding enforcement and those sorts of things, deterrent can also be an enforcement. And as we go through this, I mean, I'm not looking to, hopefully everybody follows the rules and everything is peaches and cream and no problems at all. But this will cut down in half the number of days of violation before that person goes, oh my God, this is too much. I need to stop doing this. I need corrective action and those sorts of things. And I've got a couple more that I think you might support as well that will lead into this as, too, but I think that this is a good step.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call on the amendment to increase violations 500, 1,000, and up to 1,500.
Alderperson Timian?
Aye.
Moyer?
Aye.
O'Brien?
Aye.
Waldron?
Aye.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Williams,
Nay.
Macias,
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
7 ayes, 1 nay, and that motion passes.
Thank you. Mr. Moyer?
Okay. So there was a question, thank you, about duplexes. And I think that wasn't quite yet resolved in the document that we had gotten. We're not going to allow duplexes to also add an ADU.
No, they would not be permitted because we only permit it as an accessory for a single-family detached home.
Okay,
So a
because there's a
duplex is
note
not-
in here to correct that, and I want to make sure that
Yep.
we're,
We will make sure that that is clear, that was the intent.
all right, thank you.
All right. Anything further from the council? Mr. Went?
So one of the provisions within here, and we may wind up getting to a different portion here, but was for the change in the definition of family. And I'm fine with the majority of the information that was put in there regarding caretakers, house assistance providers, and those sorts of things. And obviously, the information regarding federal housing law, I'm very good with. But I think that the increase from 3 to 5 isn't warranted. It's not required by law. I believe that we got some information that Rock Island still has just 3. Now, they do have a provision where if you want to go more than 3, there's an application process and you have to go through that. And I guess I would be open for that if that is necessary. But I don't think just to make a blanket increase. I have lived in Iowa City. I've lived in a number of college towns where you get more than 3 non-related people in a property, and without good reason, it sometimes is a bad situation. So I think that there's a reason why most places have had 3 for a long time, and we have as well. So I'd like to strike the changing from 3 to 5.
Is there a second?
From
To,
5 to 3.
Yeah, but to keep it at 3
rather than going to 5?
rather than going to 5.
Second.
Second by Alderperson Waldron. Discussion. Thank you. Mr. Schmidt?
Yeah, just seeking clarity from staff, because, and I was under the impression we were making this change in order to better reflect was it the state or federal, I forget which policy.
I would defer to Corporation Counsel on that because I believe that's where it came from, council.
So it did. As you know, David Silverman made that recommendation. And it is to ensure that there is no violation of state or federal housing law.
But what specifically, I guess, in what way could having a restriction of 3 run into that? And would the language we're adding, where we say this will not specifically violate it, wouldn't that then procure that, but then just require someone to come forward to document that to us?
Well, right, so the addition where it starts with notwithstanding,
Yeah.
that does sort of act as a safety net. The concern was that, restricting people from, associating with whoever they want to associate with. So it's sort of like, who has the burden? Certainly your safety net here provides for that. But, you could come forward with, a complaint or whatever, but the larger issue is, whether we are initially violating anyone's rights.
Thank you. Mr. Ward?
Are we aware of anyone ever filing a complaint against the city of Moline or anything regarding 3 people?
Not in my tenure.
All right, I've never heard of it, so,
Thank you.
okay.
If there's nothing further, roll call on the amendment to change the number that are allowed from 5 to 3, or keep it at 3, whichever way it is in the document. I'm sorry, I don't have it.
Alderperson Timian,
Nay.
Moyer,
Nay.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Macias,
Nay.
Went,
Aye.
and we have 5 ayes, 3 nays,
Yes,
and that motion passes.
thank you. Anything further from the council? Mr. Went?
Now I'm gonna go the other way a little bit. So, one of the things that was brought up, actually by Alderman O'Brien, was the question of, if I've got this garage that I've had for a couple of years, and now my mom is in a situation where I need to have a place for her, and I know that Alderman Waldron doesn't want to put mom in the garage, but it's a very nice garage, and I think that it can be really converted nicely. That I understand the prohibition and waiting 10 years to convert it into what might be rented to someone other than a family member. But if you've got a situation where you've got, just because of circumstances, the thing just happened to be built 7 years ago or 5 years ago, and now you're in a situation where a family member needs to move in to make this work, I think that it should be amended to allow in those situations that it could be converted into an ADU for only family members that meet the family definition that we just discussed.
That's for the newly constructed.
Well, that's for conversions.
Conversions.
Yeah, I think that, right, because the new construction, actually, there is
Yeah,
nothing.
I'm so
in it.
sorry, I used the wrong
Right.
word. The conversions,
But I guess theoretically, you could build a garage and then 2 days later, if it was for family members, you could convert it. So,
so that we have this correctly, the conversions for must be, of garages must be for family,
if within that first 10
if
years.
within first 10 years.
I hope I didn't give you that idea.
You absolutely did not, but you gave me something to write down so I could involve you.
All right, thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Because without it, then
What, you
gotta
don't
wait 10 years.
have the floor, Mr. Wynn. All right, that motion fails for lack of a
wow.
second. All right, anything further from the council? Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Wynn.
There are some provisions in here in which the ADU must conform with both the home on the lot as well as the neighboring house. And in some of our areas, that would be absolutely impossible. My house is probably a good example, a traditional Sears farmhouse to a kind of a mid-modern, weird roofline house next to me that was added on to and whatever. So I would like to, in each one of those situations, change it from and to or,
So.
which would then make it easier to have a ADU in.
To the home or
The neighboring property.
neighboring.
So each one of, there's a couple of,
Right, thank you. So motion by Alderperson Waldron, is there a second?
oh, no, that was not all.
I meant, excuse me, that just came out. I do not know where that came from. Alderperson West.
Here, I'll second for conversation.
Okay, seconded by Alderperson Timian. Sir Timian.
Thank you. Ryan, I sent you an email about this earlier. I noticed something in the language that said something to the effect of, stipulates that it needs to match to the primary residence or the neighboring residence quote, to which it is visually related. Is that kind of a catch-all that says it kind of just the primary residence, or was the neighboring property to which it adjoins intentionally put in there? Because I noticed that in other municipalities, that language isn't in there. So I felt, to his point, that there are going to be instances where a modern house and a Victorian home have no comparable design elements.
And to be fair, we don't have that requirement for a home. You know, you don't have to make your home be compatible with your neighbor's home. And so, but no, that my understanding, if you actually then go further into each of the standards, it does clearly delineate in there. It has to comply both with the subject property and the neighboring property, which I would agree with Alderperson Went that would be rather difficult to do in some situations.
And the special use permit portion of this is the double check that this is kosher, that what's being done is abiding by the ordinance. Okay. Anything further? Hearing none, roll call, please, on this amendment.
Alderperson Timian?
Aye.
Moyer?
Aye.
O'Brien?
Nay.
Waldron?
Nay.
Schmidt?
Aye.
Williams?
Nay.
Macias?
Aye.
Went?
Aye.
5 ayes, 3 nays.
That motion passes. Anything further, Mr. Nguyen?
So I'm going to get back on my horse again. I think this might be something that you might be interested in. I'm not sure. But so I have been desperately pleading to have a licensing regime in Moline rather than just a registration for rental houses, not only for duplexes and triplexes and multifamily, but also for single family. And so I would like to have a provision in this that the ADU ordinance does not go into effect until such time that the city adopts a licensing regime that includes the ADU, single-family homes, and all multifamily in the city of Moline.
That'll never happen, so I'm all in. I second.
All right, there's a motion by Alderperson Went and a second by Alderperson Waldron. Yes, Mr. Went.
The reason I do this is because I agree, and this is why I've been trying to do this. We talk about in our neighborhoods and concerns like, hey, they're going to do an ADU, and then that's the worst thing in the world and everything. But the house next door to you can become a rental tomorrow, and an absentee, out-of-market person that has nothing other than seeing that thing as a cash cow and draining every single thing out of it and putting whoever into it until they can't anymore. That's what our current situation is here. At least with the ADUs, the person who owns it has to live there and deal with the person who's renting or whatever the situation might be. But that's why this licensing regime, if you have it in there and if people are violating it, you actually have teeth. I mean, right now, God bless Brad Hallman. He goes around and does as much as we can. And I think we've got budgeted to hire a second Brad, but we hasn't.
Getting there.
I can answer that. There was originally, the intent was to have a second neighborhood improvement officer that got converted over to the rental housing program.
Well, then we need
At the insistence of those folks who are going to run the program.
Oh, so it wasn't, we didn't do that, they did it, so that's news to me. So that's something we need to probably figure out, because I've been waiting for a second Brad to get hired.
Probably had 5
since
Brads.
last year. But to that point, it can't always be him trying to massage things and work through a system in which he doesn't have a ton of teeth. In the cities where this works, you have a licensing regime, and if you violate it, huge fine. If you violate it twice, you lose your license. And not only on that property, but all the properties that you are licensing in the city. So it's not something like, oh, well, I can put that one offline and I'm still good and I can still drain as much cash out of Moline as I can. It will be something in which we have real teeth, and if people violate it, they won't be able to rent anything.
Second.
Oh, it already is, but
was
I'm glad we got your vote.
It was already seconded. Mr. Williams.
Ultimate
10
went
minutes ago.
proves that old saying, even a blind squirrel finds a walnut every once in a while. He's kind of backed into something. This, I could get behind this because this is long overdue and needed, is to bring everything online with the rental properties. Because they have, 15, 20 years ago, you could talk to people in neighborhoods and their main concern was rental properties. And they said, the rental properties will kill Moline. And as our west to I-74, as more people moved out and our older housing stock became rental properties, what did we see? An awful lot of problems in neighborhoods. That's why these neighborhood groups exist, because of crack houses and gang problems and issues that took place because of rental properties, not because of single owners, but because transient type individuals, they went through neighborhoods and rented these properties and caused trouble. It caused troubles in the school, it caused troubles in the neighborhood. The people did not want those type of people living in the neighborhoods, the homes they bought. With the rental property ordinance, something like this with inspections tied to the ADUs, this is something tangible and positive that could actually go forward and strengthen Moline and make it a better place to live. Whereas the ADUs on their own, obviously, I don't think they do.
Thank you. Mr. Moore? and
Right,
then-
thank you. Don't we already have, like, isn't one of our goals to get this established already?
The licensing program?
Yeah.
Not necessarily, but we did talk about it earlier in another community that I managed. They had similar problems, but their problems were, not only rental, single-family homes, but rentals of condominium units. And they ended up coming up with a licensing program that limited, one, the number of properties that could be licensed, and then putting a very high price tag on it. So that, and it was predominantly because of absentee landlords and renting to whomever, whenever they wanted. And then all of the issues that go with that, whether they're law enforcement issues or noise complaints or, domestics, all kind of issues that come up, so.
It's not one of the
It's not one of the
objectives.
goals, but it certainly is.
But it was part of hiring
Yeah, it was-
the rental people. And how much of an administration nightmare is it gonna be to do that?
There will be a significant body of work to manage this program.
But it creates revenue.
I mean, I don't care what computers we're using, I mean, it's going to require a significant body of work. I mean, we have landlords up until now, it's already toward the end of January, they still haven't paid their fees for 2023. In fact, 270 have not paid and maybe 202 have paid. So you can see where this is going.
So,
challenge.
I have a question. I'll get to you, Mr. Wynn.
And those those fees do not cover the cost of administering the program.
That brings me to my question, is I'm very hesitant to, well, I may not be called upon to vote on this amendment, but to have the council voting on something they don't know the cost of, even if we've talked about it, even if we all agree that we need it. I know you and I briefly talked about this previously. Do you have any estimates on, I mean, we're talking more manpower, more, et cetera.
I can only speak to what I have, my professional experience in. I came from a community that was a similar size. We had about 5,600 rental units. It was an absolute nightmare to license them. And it was always chasing our tail on it. The other concern you have, rightfully, is if you open that door for single family, do you start putting exemptions if, let's say, somebody is unable to sell their house or, needs to sell their house and move out of the community, then you begin to kind of hamstring, and then you have the issue of vacant properties. So this is a very complex issue. I would have concerns of us trying to make a policy decision, even if we're doing it through this ordinance, where we're not even sure what the cost would be, what the staff needs would be, and even what the community's feelings on it would be.
Thank you. Mr. Wynn?
A couple of things. There is a little bit of method to the madness. But to the price issue, obviously, you guys all know I'm very fiscally conservative and watch every penny and take the taxpayers' dollars very, very seriously. But to that point, I don't think we can afford not to do it. We've seen what's happened since I've been on council and the number of rentals and the number of issues we've had with rentals. And to that point, we've I've spearheaded like the vacant property registry. The land bank is now coming online. All of these things will help to address some of those issues that you brought up, because we had to build this infrastructure before you get to it. Because I agree, you do this all of a sudden one day, it is a Herculean effort to get them all done. But a couple of things. This not being a goal, I was the one that I think that sent in the goal that, and I don't know what the numbers are because we got 84 of them and everything, but it has always been conflated, licensing and register and inspection. Like, you'll read your reports and sometimes it'll say licensing and sometimes it'll say inspections and sometimes it'll say registration, but the intent, because I was the one that initially said it, was to have a licensing regime. And I've talked about it on this floor, I don't know how many times, and I believe it's supposed to come in February. I think that's what we were told a few weeks ago. To your point about chasing our tail and only half of them paying, I'm one of those. I'm very diligent. I look back through my records. I always paid it in December as soon as I got it. I don't think I ever received it. And on top of it, the fee that went out was wrong. It was based on a fee that we did not adopt, that hasn't come back to us to fix the fee schedule. So I don't think it's fair to say that that none of these landlords or half these landlords aren't paying it. I am fairly certain I never got it. And two, I think we've all admitted what was sent out was wrong. And so I hope they didn't pay it, because it was more money than they should have been paying.
All right, so we need to keep our focus on what we're doing here.
Well, but these are points that are now out in the public, and I think it's
That's
important that they
fine,
get
I'm not
the
arguing
correct
that with you,
information.
we just have to move it along because we have guests here and
And I think they are very interested in the conversation, and I think that they are very happy with some of the things that we've done.
Yeah, we have all kinds of guests as well.
Yeah, so with that, I really think that this is important, and I don't think we can afford not to do it.
Got it. Mr. Schmidt.
I agree with moving forward with a rental licensing program. And I think that needs to be done right and done well. I think that ADUs are not going to be the most significant piece of that puzzle, in large part because they will be such a small piece of the puzzle, and as well because we are requiring the special use permit and the on-site residency. And so while I think we need to go forward with that, ensuring that we are fighting against absentee landlords, people who are not caring for those properties that they own, which is where I tend to put the onus in those situations, and I'm not interested in attaching those two things at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Watt.
Quite honestly, one of the reasons why I'm attaching these together, because there are two different factions on this council, and my hope is by doing this, it'll have both of them have the most incentive to get the licensing up and running and done. So by attaching it, I think there's going to be one faction that wants to get the ADUs up and running, so that will get that moving forward, and there'll be another faction that says, I don't necessarily like the ADUs, but I want the inspection to move forward because I think it's the best thing for the city. And so we have, again, I brought up the licensing thing for, you guys have all heard me, for months and months and months and months. We have to get it over the finish line, and I'd like to actually be here to vote for it. So I'd like it sooner than later.
I see your hand. It is my job to keep this meeting running smoothly, and I have been gracious and allowed people to speak more than twice on an item. We are in regular council, that code applies. I'm going to now insist on that, so please condense your remarks as you need to follow that code. Mr. Schmidt.
I believe the hypotheticals cut in both ways in any negotiation, to say where putting things together would also mean someone who despised an ordinance that passed would then sabotage another later one. I'm not interested in putting those things together on a promise. If we did them at the same time, on the same ordinance, that would be different. But I'm not interested in that connection.
All right, if there's nothing further, roll call on this amendment attaching, it's that the ADU does not go into effect, ADU ordinance doesn't go into effect until a licensing regime is in place.
Alderperson Timian?
Nay.
Moyer?
Nay.
O'Brien?
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Nay.
Williams,
Aye.
Macias,
Nay.
Went.
Aye.
4 ayes, 4 nays. Your Honor, do you care to vote?
Nay. I'm voting nay. Thank you.
And that motion fails.
Thank you. Anything further on the motion on the ADU ordinance? Mr. Went.
This is a small thing, but within the ordinance, it says that we're going, they have to record a lien against their property, basically announcing all the regulations for it. And if at some point that is released, it says the city is going to cause the release to be recorded. I think that we should provide it to them, but they should be the one that pays for it, not the taxpayers of Moline.
Second.
Motion by Alderperson Went, seconded by Alderperson Waldron. Discussion. Hearing none, roll call, please.
Alderperson Timian,
Aye.
Moyer,
Aye.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Williams,
Nay.
Macias,
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
7 ayes, 1 nay. The motion passes.
Thank you. Anything further? Hearing, oh, was that a hand or?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to speak on the thing. I have been a proponent of this ADU thing from before many of you guys were on here, but I'm having a hard time supporting it without the licensing portion of it. I think that it is really important for that. So with that, I would, and to your comment about doing them at the same time or whatever, I'd like to move to table this until the evening in February where they're going to present the licensing regime to see if we can do this the right way.
Second.
Motion by Alderperson Went, seconded by Alderperson Waldron. Roll call, please.
Alderperson Timian,
Nay.
Moyer,
Nay.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Nay.
Williams,
Aye.
Macias,
Nay.
Went.
Aye.
4 ayes, 4 nays, Your Honor.
Nay.
And that motion fails.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt.
Yeah, I think there has been a lot of changes and motions and discussion on this tonight, and I think that I don't feel comfortable voting until I've had a chance to review it after changes and with fresh eyes. So I'd like to make a motion to table this until either 1 or 2 meetings from now, when staff is able to prepare a version with the changes included into the red line document.
I'll second that.
Motion by Alderperson Schmidt, seconded by Alderperson Went, to table 1 week.
1 or 2 weeks.
Until staff.
2 weeks.
Until staff can
Until
prepare
staff,
the red line.
1 or 2 weeks until you can prepare the red line. I just need to write it down for myself. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Alderperson Timian,
Nay.
Moyer,
Nay.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Williams,
Nay.
Macias,
Nay.
Went.
Aye.
4 ayes, 4 nays.
Nay.
And that motion fails.
Okay,
Call the question.
thank you. We need a second to call the question. Is there a second? Hearing none. Mr. Wentz.
I just want to make one more comment.
What? Nope, because have you spoken previously on the?
I've spoken on each amendments, but
Yes,
this
correct.
is,
So this is your second. There you go.
well, no, I made an amendment, so.
No, this is your second speaking to the ordinance itself, this motion. Thank you. Please continue.
So, to that end, again, I'm supportive of this, but it has to be done right. We have to be able to actually read what all the changes are to this thing. I think this is crazy that we're gonna be voting on something that we don't actually have the language in front of us that is clear and concise. And two, the licensing piece. So both of those, because of both of those things, I'm gonna be voting no, even though this is something I've been pushing for since 2019. So we may wind up being able to figure out
You're
a way
okay.
to
He's
do it the
good.
right way as we move forward.
I'm
But I
good.
just don't think that this is really good government, that we're voting on things without actually having, because this is going to change our code, and we don't have the specific language, because we've all seen tonight that there are stuff that we wind up getting that isn't exactly right within the materials that were provided, and I want to make sure that it's right. And
To your point, we spent, I don't know what the time frame was, but going through, I believe it was 20-some amendments on Chapter 2, and we voted on it that night, if I'm remembering correctly. So what I'm going to ask is that the clerk please read what the amendments are, and I have them in front of me, and that is sufficient in my mind, which is why I voted nay.
point of information,
Yes, Mr. Went.
that on Chapter 2, each one of those was, we're removing this word and we're putting this in. Many of the amendments, because I made them tonight, were general things that says, hey, we want this involved with it and that involved with it, and all the places where it says that do this. And so those are not are not the same at all. I can't talk tonight. And with that, it was clear which words were removed and which ones were added, because I, again, made the majority of those and provided them. So it is
I've asked
different.
the clerk to read them for you all.
Okay, so we have 5 amendments that passed this evening on this item. The first, and I might have to go back and get detail from the recording, so here's what I have noted. The first was to amend and improve the ordinance by requiring replacement of all off-street parking lost, thus protecting the neighborhood. Then we have,
Whoa, that's not it.
I know, you had some detail that I'm gonna have to pull
I
from
made that motion, and that was one of the 3 provisions within it.
One parking, an additional off-street parking, and replacing the spots that were once
And to
there.
bring the current home
And
up
for-
to
up to
the.
today's requirements.
To the day's requirements, and the additional one that was already within the ordinance already.
Right.
okay.
This is what I'm talking about.
So that was that one. Then we have Amendment 2, increasing the violation fines from 5 to 500,000 and up to 1,500, limiting the number of family members, limiting the number in the unit as 3 rather than 5. The change to or under must conform the style of the home to the home or the neighboring home. The amendment, and that's what I have.
And then also,
And then,
Yeah.
10-year rule.
right,
The
the
family member.
recording,
Oh, yes,
Is the
no, that
responsibility of the owner.
failed for lack of a second.
no.
no, that one
Where?
passed.
No second on the 10-year rule,
Yeah, correct.
Correct, there was no second.
correct.
No, on this
But-
one there was.
But there was a motion that passed 7-1 that the city would not pay for.
Oh, yes, sorry, that one I
Recording.
missed.
For the
Yes,
recording.
thank you, that one. Pay for the recording, sorry. So
Under
those,
what?
those
Those were the
those
5.
were the changes.
But
So,
for clarification, the family member conversion, did that fail?
From 5 to 3?
No, the one
No,
that's
about,
passed.
No,
right,
that one did
that's
pass.
why I
She
read
did-
it out.
She didn't know
Yeah,
that one.
but she didn't. So that's it's getting confusing and not
Well,
right.
she
why
then
this
took over reading those, but
Yes,
she
I
did
took
include
over.
that
I
one.
included that one. So I've gone through all of them, and the motion to table for 1 to 2 weeks has failed, and so we are back to the motion on the table. Mr. Wendt?
Can we get clarification on which places the and is struck and the or is inserted?
Do you have the ordinance number, reference number there? It's the,
let me pull it up here.
where it's conforming to the style of the home.
1 second here, my apologies. Let's see here. That would be
Again? We can't make it again.
so
Your Honor, while they're looking that up,
Yes, Mr. Waldron?
I would like to make a motion to table this for 2 weeks and until staff can write it up completely and then we can read what we're voting.
Second.
And so
And it
there's a
failed, but I
motion.
can make a motion.
motion on the floor by Waldron, seconded by Went, and this was, because the date, timeline is different, it's okay to redo it.
I believe it's February 7th.
All right, so, motion to table, roll call, please.
Still voting aye.
Alderperson Timian?
Change my vote.
Aye.
Moyer?
Aye.
O'Brien?
Aye.
Waldron?
Aye.
Schmidt?
Aye.
Williams?
Nay.
Macias?
Aye.
Went?
Aye.
7 ayes, 1 nay, and the motion passes.
Okay. We'll see you back in 2 weeks. Thank you for your work on that. Thank you to everyone for your patience. I think that we had one pulled from the consent agenda. That one is up next, is it?
Right, we're on.
10:09.
We're on the resolutions. And that's Council Bill 1009-2023, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to an easement encroachment licensing agreement with DeLewis Bay Properties LLC for the property located at 3566 49th Street to allow installation of retaining wall and swimming pool.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderperson Went, seconded by Waldron. Discussion.
I had pulled this off on Sunday because there was some stuff that was wrong and missing in it. Tony sent that out, so
Okay.
it's good now.
Okay.
It is not what's published, but what was sent out that we're voting on, right?
Yes.
Well, I just want to make sure because
Yes.
we didn't clarify that in the.
Yeah, it clarified where
Yeah.
that space, that encroachment was.
And that they pay us, not that we pay ourselves. The
Correct.
compensation was wrong.
Thank you. So, hearing no further discussion, roll call, please.
Alderperson Timian?
Aye.
Moyer?
Aye.
O'Brien?
Aye.
Waldron?
Aye.
Schmidt?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
Macias?
Aye.
Went?
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays, and that motion passes. Council Bill 1012-2023, resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to an amendment to professional services agreement with IMED Corp. for engineering services related to the design of stormwater conveyance infrastructure downstream of the 49th Street Stormwater Pumping Station in the amount of $44,000 and authorizing the Director of Utilities to execute all necessary documents.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderperson Wentz, seconded by Moyer. Okay, discussion. Mr. Waldron.
Director Lodi, is there anything in this contract with IMEG that guarantees a time when they'll be done?
There is not. However, we can certainly hold their feet to the fire. We're actually being asked to hold off until some of the questions that regarding the TIF are resolved also.
Okay, because currently we've had trouble getting design engineering services almost everywhere getting done in a timely fashion. So this just is giving them another project that they can delay, and thank you.
We understand.
Hold their feet to the fire is all I'm saying.
Mr. Vitale.
Yeah, in part, the other answer to this question is even though the council was to approve this evening, the intention is that we would not incur the cost for this specifically until such time that council has had time to review a potential inducement resolution for the formation of a TIF on Illinois 92 to support PAR Industries remaining in Moline and expanding in Moline. And these costs could then be incurred as a part of that against the future TIF, which would be months down the road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's nothing further. Roll call, please.
Alderperson Timian?
Aye.
Moyer?
Aye.
O'Brien?
Aye.
Waldron?
Aye.
Schmidt?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
Macias?
Aye.
Went?
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays, and that motion passes. First reading ordinances. Council Bill 3002-2023, an ordinance amending Chapter 15, Garbage and Trash of the Moline Code of Ordinances by enacting one new Article 5, Pollution Control Facility Siting. Council Bill 3003-2023, an ordinance approving a community host agreement by and between the City of Moline and Lakeshore Recycling Systems LLC.
Thank you. I think we need to go back to 3002, 2023, because we do have representatives here that have information for us. So I would, do we need a motion to do that?
No, there can be
No.
discussion during this time.
Okay, so we're on 3002, 2023. Mr. Vita?
Yes, this evening, one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to have the opportunity for Lakeshore Recycling Services to at least present to members of council as well as reveal to the general public what is contemplated in a general sense for the 10-acre site, and introduce Katie Neary from LRS.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council and staff. Thank you so much for your time tonight. It's been a spirited evening. I can tell you I work in municipal services and I've left meetings after midnight, so you guys are okay. So
She did ask if we were active when she
Yes.
first walked in, and I said, well, it depends.
So I'll try to be fast and brief, and Walter stole my thunder over here, so I don't have a whole lot to add, but, and so I'll try not to be repetitive. I'm very proud, first and foremost, to be a former resident of the area. I lived off of Great River Road. Very fortunate to get to know the wonderful people and the culture of the Quad City area, in particular Johnny's Steakhouse, which we just came from before I came here, and also, of course, the Duck City Bistro. So my counterpart, who has really brought it to this point, is taking a much well-deserved vacation. So bear with me, I'm just kind of filling in to an extent. However, I have been working with the attorneys and engineers, and I just want to share with you, I have been in the industry since 1992, as of last year. Privileged to work in various capacities for both publicly traded and private companies throughout the United States and outside of the United States, with landfills, transfer stations, waste hauling companies. So I've enjoyed the last 6 years of my career with LRS. Honestly, it's been the best time of my entire career. It's been very exciting. So I currently work in municipal services. I oversee 31 municipalities currently, and I also work in government affairs. So, but really what I want to talk to you about is LRS. If I feel like I have bifocals on, so sometimes if I'm looking at you strangers, I apologize in advance. But so LRS, I don't know how many of you are familiar with LRS, but I just want to give you a little bit of an introduction. You might see our trucks out there. I have seen some LRS containers in downtown Moline. I was really excited to see that. So LRS is an independent local recycling company. We are based out of Rosemont, Illinois. It started with 3 industry veterans over 20 years ago. Began with a material recovery facility, which is basically a recycle facility where the materials are brought and processed and shipped out to buyers, and a commercial waste hauling company, and those were all local. It was actually out of Morton Grove at the time. We've since just recently moved to Rosemont. One great thing you should know, LRS is a domestic recycler. We've always been a domestic recyclers, and actually most of the materials that we recycle are resourced right here in the Midwest. And we can do that because we really are, and I think a lot of people that work with us can attest that we are on the cutting edge of a lot of things, and that's because LRS is made up of a lot of private companies that have come together. A lot of our executive team are all former owners, and that's why I personally love working with LRS, because we're very nimble and flexible. We're large enough in the sense that, we have strong financial backing, but we're nimble enough to know the Moline community. We're not going to be strangers here. We're definitely going to plug in, and I'm looking forward to that personally. So hopefully they'll choose me. LRS provides a variety of aligned services. In addition to disposal options, which we're talking about tonight, we do residential, commercial, non-hazardous industrial recycling and waste services. We also have a municipal street sweeping business, portable storage units, portable restrooms, construction fencing. We're mulch distributors from the wood that we collect, and we recently started septic service companies. So over the past 7 to 10 years, LRS set into motion a very robust acquisition plan. That's why you see our trucks and our containers out here today. We have expanded our footprint, now reaching over 10 states. If you took the U.S. and you split it in 3, we are straight up and down the center. We have over 83 facilities now throughout the Midwest. We're very unique in that LRS is the only independent waste service provider that owns a landfill. And We actually purchased a dilapidated facility, I would say, that was in need of a lot of work. The EPA did not like it. We purchased facilities and we do make them better. I think it's something that we're also well known for. We put a lot of money into things, I'll say that. So I wanted to talk to you about why that's important really quick. It's something that I believe you should know. As a citizen of Moline, I'm not right now, but I was in the area, a representative of the citizens. Disposal as a whole, whether it's recycling, organics, or garbage, it accounts for 30% of the cost to pick up garbage and recycling. And disposal is so when I started in this industry over 30 years ago, there were actually 50 service providers just here in Northern Illinois. Today, out in the big city of Chicago and just in that whole area, we're down to about 5. And 3 of those are publicly traded companies that have really just squeezed the market such that they just make it so you can't dispose there. They charge whatever they want, pretty much. And so if you don't have a place to dispose, you're probably not going to make it in the garbage industry today. So here in Moline, you basically have 2, right? You've got Millennium Waste, you've got Republic Services. Great companies. I've actually kind of been around about where we all worked for all of them. It's like the thing about garbage companies. I started with BFI, which is Brothers, Friends, and In-Laws, and it still is to this day, kind of in a roundabout way. So really, private companies that I never thought would sell have sold. Even in this area, you might know Mooring Disposal, awesome company, great assets. I never thought that they would sell, and even they have recently sold to Republic Services. So fortunately, LRS has been able to partner with and acquire a couple companies out here. We have our landfill out here in the Atkinson and Henry County, and now we have a footprint. We want to do a lot more out here. We want to bring awesome services to this community. We do things a little different. I would encourage you to look on our webpage at lrsrecycles.com as well, just to kind of get an idea of who we are. Given the end disposition of our disposal and materials collected from the homes today account for 30% of the cost, we need vertical integration here. So actually, this facility that we're just looking at today, and this is just all preliminary to an extent. It's been a lot of work getting just to this point. It's still preliminary. So you're still going to have an application come. All the details that I'm sure you will all like very much are going to be, it's going to be a lot of information, but you will have counsel and engineers that we actually pay for you to look at these things. You choose them, we pay for them, and I think that that's going to be very helpful. So we do need a level playing field here. I understand why somebody might think you don't need another garbage company out here, but landfills run out of airspace, so you do, actually. So I'm pleased to share with you, after a few years of hunting, I think we found an amazing property. It is in the air park, I believe that's what they call it. We've secured a lease as of this morning, an opportunity to build a state-of-the-art facility that will benefit all of the citizens of Moline. It will benefit all of the stakeholders, and I count 5 in my mind. And the property, again, it's located with an industrial area. It's ideal. It's really great in terms of the roads that merge there. It's on a property located outside this business park. Now, because it's in an airport area, it means that the regulations and things that we have to abide by are even more next level. We already do next level. I'll tell you, I believe this to be true. I think maybe Walter can attest to this. I don't know, but I think we do a great job, and you're going to be very pleased with the outcome. It's located, of course, in this TIF district. I think the issue that you brought to the table will be no issue. We will take care of that. We're looking to invest tens of millions of dollars into this community. And I think that it's going to be a very good bolster for the community. We're going to develop a facility using local union contractors. In addition, we're going to generate long-term, very good paying jobs for citizens. We will offer 2 recycle drop-off facilities. I know we talked about that. So you already mentioned that, and the electronic waste drop-off. And finally, we're extremely pleased that the airport and Rock Island County Waste Management Agency will also financially benefit from the tipping fees that they'll receive. So with that, hopefully that was fast. I talked fast, I walked fast, I tried to go as fast as I could for you all. I have a video. This is just a general idea, so just please don't think that this is it. It's just kind of a general initial idea. I want you to just kind of, it might be loud, the music is loud on this for some reason, so. This is what it would look like. Thank you. So this is kind of like the trucks on steroids, just so you know. I just wanted to make sure you understand that we show every type of truck that'll come into this facility. So you see them pulling on the scale. And then they go off to their designated area. That's the hydro, that's just the mud water, basically. And then there's an LRS Packer truck on the scale. And then you see a long transfer trailer pulling in. And that transfer trailer will carry 3 of those Packer trucks right there, 3 of those loads. And that basically will go to our landfill. Or I think another local recycle facility that we use out here. Those are just empty roll-off boxes. We won't leave garbage overnight, by the way. So there's fast opening and closing doors, and there is a negative air pressure system on the inside of that building. So the air that's circulated in there is actually captured in the building and recirculated in the building, and it's treated. It is not masked. It's actually, kind of unheard of, actually, in our industry. We don't, most of the time, you throw up a building, and, I mean, there's regulations, don't get me wrong, but it's not to the extent that we're going to be offering. So, like in this example, we're going to change this so you'll see what it'll really be like, but the doors will be closed when he's dumping that load, and it won't open until he's got his entire truck closed. So that's a tarp. So you see that long truck that came in, it kind of goes down. So that's a tarp going over the top. Will be fully closed before it exits the building and before that door opens. And then he's off, and that's it. So I'm here to answer any questions you have. I will leave my cards with your wonderful clerk Parr. Did I say that correctly? Mm-hmm. Okay. So if you have any questions, I'll have a brief window to be able to speak with you. Once it goes into our application, you will be just speaking strictly with your consultants and attorneys. So it's just kind of a rule of law. So any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for hanging in.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to miscellaneous business. I have none this evening. Mr. Williams.
Just short and sweet. Carson's Park, they took a fence out last year. You might have heard about that. And one of the fence posts, for some unknown reason, was not filled, and it was probably almost 4 foot deep. And it was really big around. There was a bunch of kids, and they were standing it as I was walking the dog, and I saw a head pop up out of the hole. And I thought, what is this? But just so happened that a young man from Parks was driving by. He's got the dregs. I think it's Jason. I'm not sure. Jason. Well, he jumped out, and he was right on it. And he was, he took care of it, and he put a big flag in there, and then he went to get some dirt, and he made a phone call, and within a short period of time, they had that filled, and with as many kids that were in the park, that was, he did an outstanding job. Just wanted to give him a little pat on the back there.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Mr. Macias.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Mr.
Thank you.
I've spoken enough.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Mr. Moore.
Thank you. I should mention that I got to sit in and do the naturalization ceremony, which is amazing. I highly recommend it, absolutely. And I got to do the MLK celebration on Monday, which was also amazing.
Thank you for being pro tem. I'm back teaching, but I did want to add that I did craft a welcome letter to anyone that was at that ceremony that was good, lives in Moline. It included some resources from the city. The staff helped put that together, so that turned out well.
Yeah, both events were well attended from a variety of communities, so it was very inspirational.
Great. Mr. O'Brien?
Nothing. Nothing, Your Honor.
Mr. Schmidt?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Mr. Vitas?
Nothing.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dykhuizen?
Nothing, Your Honor.
All right, we're all set. For any further public comment?
Yes.
Yes. Diane? 3 minutes.
That's fine, that's fine. I appreciate all the discussion and the concern that everybody had. I would like to make a comment in regards to some of the things that I heard that were said tonight. I attended, I think, every meeting involved in this, and I know that was a comment made. And I think I heard more no's than yes to it. I never did hear anyone make a comment about where this should be located or not located. I don't think anybody brought that up in any of the comments that I ever heard. And I know that the ladies sitting back here and the other were very shocked to hear that comment. So if it happened, I'm sorry it happened, but I didn't hear it, so. The other thing I have to say is that I do agree wholeheartedly that our neighborhoods are failing. And as I drive around Moline, as a longtime resident, I see houses in horrible shape, and people are still living in them. And somebody is taking advantage of this. And I also see, when I look at the real estate every Sunday, you will see the same names of people who are buying property. I don't know if they are the ones who are paying, I don't know the conditions, but we do have people who have extensive collections of housing, and I don't know how they keep them all up. So I think that we really have to make that our number one priority, because Moline is not succeeding, and it's not gonna come around unless we take care of the neighborhoods and bring some pride back to them. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if there's no further public comment, I believe we have executive session.
Your Honor, I make a motion that the council convene an executive session for the purpose of discussion of appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, 5 ILCS 120/2C1, and discussion of closed session minutes, 5 ILCS 120/2C6.
Second.
Motion by Alderperson Williams, seconded by Wendt. Roll call, please.
Alderperson Timian?
Aye.
Moyer?